Hello everyone, this is your friend Shinobi Nexus 2.0 and we are back new fanfic. What if a Naruto fan reincarnated as an Uchiha girl part 2? Humiya sat up from her bed and stretched, feeling more refreshed than she had in a long time. She looked outside of her window at the bright morning and reflected upon the changes that unfolded. Life in the Uchiha household seemed to have formed into organized chaos the moment Makoto returned from the hospital with baby Sasuke. With Sasuke came an abundance of screeches, his endless demands needing to be attended by every able-bodied family member. Much to Humiya's dismay, she was not able-bodied but feeble and bedridden with another fever. So, she laid there, trapped in her room for 2 whole weeks. It was worse when Makoto prevented her from meeting Sasuke a full week after just to make sure she was well enough to see the baby. The only bright side to her plight was that she hardly saw Fugaku. He was graced by work. He left in the early mornings and returned in the late evenings, stealthily avoiding most of Sasuke's demands. The only time she saw him was when he opened her bedroom to stare her down once in the morning and once at night, a very eerie sight to see. But today, Humiya felt as bright as the early morning rays with her fever gone. She got up and ran out of her stuffy room to Sasuke's, whose room was luckily next door. Humiya slowly slid open the door and saw her old crib stationed in the middle of the room. The gaps in the brown railing were wide enough for her to see Sasuke laying snugly against its cream cushion. She crept deeper into his room and climbed the railing with familiar ease to get a better look at him. Humiya smiled as she gazed at Sasuke while he slept soundly, marveling at his angelic appearance. Like a cherub, his cheeks and nose were rosy against his bright face. He gripped his fluffy blanket tucked around him with his lashes twitching as he dreamed. "Nice to meet you," she whispered to him in English before putting her finger on his hand, inwardly gushing as the baby curled his fingers around it. As she rubbed her thumb gently over Sasuke's fingers, she heard a distant knock that came from the front door, making her lift her head. "Kushina, it is a pleasure to see you again. Come in." Humiya heard Makoto's pleasant voice echo from downstairs. She felt her good mood crumble the moment she heard Kushina chuckle. "It's so good to see you as well. How ya doing? I brought housewarming gifts. There is something for everyone. Here is yours." "Oh, thank you for the gifts. I am faring well, thank you for asking. I will make sure Fugaku and Itachi receive their gifts once they return. However, I must say that this house has been in my husband's family for generations. So, it is never too late for housewarming gifts, ya know." Humiya gently pried her finger out of Sasuke's surprisingly strong grasp as she heard Makoto and Kushina's voices become louder. Knowing that they were coming her way, Humiya sped out of Sasuke's room and into the long hallway, wishing she could hear their footsteps. It surprised her how light everyone's footsteps were, especially Makoto's. She did everything silently now that Humiya thought about it. Sasuke is asleep in his crib and Humiya is most likely with him. She recently recovered from a fever and your gift will surely brighten her day. The poor thing. I would have also gotten her something that could have helped strengthen her if I knew. Humiya looked around and saw the entrance to the bathroom slightly opened. She quickly entered the room. The quaint tiled room consisted only of a white toilet, a vanity, and a mirror. The shower and bath were elsewhere, something she always found odd. Another oddity about the room was the window above the toilet. Humiya turned to the mirror that reflected the natural light from the window, feeling a strong urge to look into it. She lifted her tiny foot onto the toilet lid and climbed onto the counter, her feet dangling off the edge when she situated herself into a sitting position. She stared at her reflection, her black baggy eyes staring back at her. Humiya glared. Her face, her hair, she hated everything. She watched as her dark brown hair flowed as she turned her head, blowing away the bits that landed against her discolored lips. Humiya haphazardly ran her locks out of her face, it dead against her hand. She swallowed the lump in her throat and placed her fingers on the cold glass. It wasn't long after she made her deal with Naka that she realized she was not blessed with a photographic memory. Even now, the clarity that she had as a newborn was slowly fading, blurs of details disintegrating in her memories. What she could not recall were blurs in the vast collection of clear moments. Not even her appearance in her past life was completely safe. She missed her old appearance, but she could hardly remember it. What if I forget too much? Diana, she whispered in English, her breath heavy and shallow. My name was Diana Baggerly. I was 18 years old when I died. I was driving home from work when a truck hit me. I am now. Before she could continue, there was a knock on the door that made her flinch. Her shoulder bumped against the mirror, and she grabbed hold of the faucet to prevent herself from falling off the counter. Her body shivered as she leaned against the cold mirror. Humiya, are you in there? Makoto asked before knocking again. Is everything alright? Yes, Humiya squeaked as she regained her balance, using the mirror as a crutch. Toilet. On toilet. Alright, remember to wash your hands after you are done. Okay. Also, please, do not sit on the counter and muddy the mirror with your hands like before. Humiya immediately retracted her hands from the mirror, her palm clearly imprinted on it. She bit her lip. Humiya, Makoto asked in a warning tone. Silence spread between them before Makoto sighed. Just don't do it again and come to your room when you are done in there. You don't want to keep your Auntie Kushina waiting, do you? No. Coming. Humiya called. Makoto's lack of response let Humiya know that she was gone. She felt safe enough to grumble as she climbed off the vanity. She then flushed the empty toilet and took out a stool to get up to the sink to wash her hands, knowing full well that Makoto would know if she didn't. Humiya slowly opened the door to the empty hallway and resigned herself to her fate. She saw the door to her room was open, the voices of Makoto and Kushina conversing inside. Makoto, which one do you think little Humiya would like better? This hairpin or the other? Kushina fretted, her voice quick and jumpy. I thought of buying her a kimono or two at that boutique I found near the market, but I was at a loss when the woman asked for her size. Makoto chuckled. Kushina, when have you become such a worrywart? My daughter loves just about everything I put on her and I think they are quite adorable. Humiya peeked into her room to see Kushina and Makoto kneeling on seating cushions by her bed. Kushina was holding two shiny wooden stick hairpins with flowers carved on the ends of each one. One was reddish-brown while the other was a deep chocolate. She leaned against the door frame, already feeling tired just imagining the activity that was about to ensue. Despite that, she must admit that the pins were quite eye-catching. Makoto turned to the bedroom door toward Humiya, and their eyes met. Makoto's smile widened. Kushina looked at her and brightened as well. There you are, Humiya. Come in. Don't be shy, Kushina ushered. Humiya hesitantly walked to where Makoto was kneeling next to Kushina. She stood awkwardly between them. Their radiating presence felt suffocating in the closed space of her room. She looked to Kushina, stiff in her movement, and greeted her. Welcome home, she shouted, blushing when she realized she slipped up her greeting again. Kushina let out a gush as she put her hand over her heart. Ah, you're so cute, you know. She scooted closer to Humiya to give her a better view of the hairpins. Humiya, do you like them? Makoto asked. Kushina made sure to get them just for you. Humiya stared at the pins in Kushina's hand, twiddling her fingers nervously. Yes. Pretty, she whispered. Let me do your hair. I know a perfect style. Kushina piped. Humiya unconsciously grabbed a piece of her hair and nodded. Okay, she said and watched Makoto get up and take a brush out of the drawer of her end table. Remember to be gentle, Kushina. I don't want to see chunks of her hair all over the place like that one time. Kushina gasped as she grabbed Humiya's shoulders and sat her in front of her. You still remember that? That was years ago. I really thought you had to pull the knots out, ya know. Makoto sniggered as she handed the brush to Kushina. Yes, it was a miracle that you were not bald back then. Especially with all the knots I found when I brushed yours. Kushina laughed in reply. Humiya felt Kushina lift portions of her hair and gently start to brush it, her tangles tightening as the brush forced her hair to separate. Humiya flinched at the sting of getting her hair pulled before the familiar feeling of dizziness overcame her. Her heart stopped as the images in her mind's eye began to merge into her reality. She knew what was coming but wasn't ready for it. Humiya wanted to cry out and struggled to prevent what happened in the forest, but her body stilled like last time. She felt Kushina stop combing her hair, but could not hear what she was saying, for the voices of her memories filled her ears. Sadness filled her being, but those feelings were mixed with the ones present to her from long ago. She was no longer sitting in her room as Humiya Uchiha, but in her bathroom as Diana Baggerly. Ack, she hissed quietly, letting go of her brush that sucked to her puffy light brown hair. She stared down at the cause of her discomfort. Her left hand felt prickly and numb. She knew the cause, the jagged scar that ran down her palm made sure of it. Diana looked at the wall of the large bathroom at a painting of a young girl looking out in a hilly landscape, its realism shining brightly with its concise colors. But Diana noticed none of the intricate aspects, they looked faded against the script of her initials painted in the corner. There was a knock on the door. Come in, Diana called as she glanced at the door, flexing her hand as pain tingled across her fingers. Diana sweet, are you? Oh dearie, you should have called me, her mom remarked, assessing Diana's condition before closing the bathroom door behind her. Is your carpal tunnel? I'm fine. She rubbed her agitated hand. Quite nervous about today. Diana motioned to the shiny navy blue graduation robe hanging on the shower curtain rod. Her mom gave a look of understanding. I see. Well, just standing isn't going to fix your hair. Sit down. Diana sat down on the toilet seat lid, facing the tub that was littered with scented beauty products that were sold in her mom's company, Baggerly Bangs, written on the different sized bottles. She felt her hand receive a hard pinch which caused her to hiss in pain and Makoto calling her name, making her flinch. Sorry, Diana sweet. You should have wet your brush more, her mom sighed guilty, the brush that was stuck in her hair in her hand. Diana smelt the nostalgic scent of pure lavender emit from the product her mom put in her hair before feeling the soft bristles of the brush against her usually rebellious curls. I am thinking of doing a mermaid braid, her mom remarked. Diana bit her lip. Mom, we can't do that. We don't have time. Can't I have something simpler? Like a French braid. Her mom snorted. A French braid. My daughter will not wear a casual braid on her graduation day. You really hurt my pride as a hairstylist. A simple elegant style like a mermaid braid is not something that would take me hours to do. Her mom turned on the sink to wet her brush. Besides, there's nothing wrong with being fashionably late. And you have a large class size. They need time for the seniors to gather, organize your class, and have you all practice at least once if my memory is correct. So being a few minutes, heck, even 15 minutes late will not prevent you from attending graduation. I am sure your teachers must have frightened you into thinking that you had to be early. Teachers can be sneaky like that. Diana relaxed her shoulders as she followed her mom's logic. A few moments passed between them, her feeling at ease in her mom's company. There, all done. What do you think? Her mom asked as she put her hands on her shoulders. Diana got up from the toilet seat and looked at herself in the mirror. She pulled a few strands behind her ear before she assessed her appearance. She was of average height with skin a light coffee. She disliked the freckles on her face and bags under her hazel eyes. I almost forgot. Your dad will be driving you to graduation, her mom bluntly told her. This made her body freeze and the serene feeling within her shatter. Dad is? She asked, her voice cracking a little. Of course, Her mom tutted as grabbed a bow from the drawer and tied it to the end of her hair. Your father insisted. Diana wanted to argue, but she knew that she would shut her down like all the other times she tried to argue about her dad before. Sometimes, she wondered how her mom could be so clueless. Her frozen body went ablaze as she thought about him. As if on cue, there was a knock on the door and a deep voice call from behind it. Diana leered at the door whereas her mom's face brightened with hope. Come in, honey. Just finished doing our daughter's hair, her mom called cheerfully. Diana wished her dad would decide to not open the door and just ignore her like always, but slowly, the door creaked open to reveal the bane of her existence. At a glance, he did not look like someone who would devote their life to being a concept artist for a video game company. In his black suit and navy blue tie, he looked as much like a military man as he did in his youth. However, unlike in his youth, life chipped away at his appearance. Deep bags hung under his sharp light brown eyes and frown lines carved his espresso brown skin. He straightened his back as he approached and cleared his throat. Diana's shoulders hunched and looked toward her mom with the look of betrayal. Her mom only smiled. Diana felt as though she was slapped in the face, but she was pinched in her cheek. Anywho, I think I hear Sterling calling. I will see you two later. Love you. Her mom cheered to break the ice before kissing Diana and her husband on the cheek before leaving. There was a moment of silence between them as Diana's dad stared her down, his expression unreadable. She could hardly stand the tension. Diana, we need to talk, her dad commanded, his voice soft but stern. Her stomach curdled at his voice, making her cross her arms over her stomach. The spiky feeling of fear wrapped around her fiery, clutching it tightly. There is nothing we need to talk about, Dad, she uttered, the numb feeling in her hand intensifying. I will be out in a bit. I still have to put my makeup on. Her dad took a step forward, making her recoil. You can do your makeup in the car. We can talk here or there. I am not a patient man. Before Diana could reply, a hot energy filled her and the scene before her shattered. In front of her was no longer her intimidating father but her frantic guardian kneeling before her, tightly gripping her arms. Humiya, can you hear me? Makoto cried, gently shaking her. Humiya nodded sluggishly, her mind feeling foggy and her body heavy. She blinked down at Makoto's eyes glowing red with the Sharingan. It is okay. You are fine, Makoto whispered before giving Humiya a tight embrace. She felt limp in her guardian's arms, so she leaned against her with all her weight. In response, Makoto picked her up. You must be exhausted. Time for bed, Makoto said carefully before doing just that. Humiya looked to see Kushina lifting the covers of her bed and helped Makoto tuck her into it. Has this happened before? Kushina asked with a concerned expression. Makoto nodded as she took the pin out of Humiya's hair. Yes. I am sorry you had to witness it. Don't be sorry. I am just glad that we got her out of whatever she was in. Humiya watched as the pair talked and felt a pang of guilt as they conversed. She knew the hallucination that she was having was not normal and wondered if she was really going crazy. Suddenly, the sounds of baby Sasuke's screams echoed throughout the house. Makoto got up from Humiya's bed and looked toward the door in a rush. Kushina, can you stay with Humiya for a moment? Sure. Makoto sped out of the room. Can, Kushina voiced, looking deep in thought. Humiya gripped her blanket as she looked at Kushina's distant expression. Sorry, she whispered with a sniffle. Kushina exhaled and kneeled by her bedside. She let out a chuckle. You're as apologetic as your mom, ya know, she replied before brushing Humiya's hair from her face. We just want you to get better, she replied. Do you hurt anywhere? Humiya shook her head. No. Tired. Kushina grabbed Humiya's hand. Then, I will just tell you a story that was passed down by my grandma to my ma and from my ma to me. Kushina began her tale. Humiya tried to listen to the story, but her eyes were growing heavy. She watched as Kushina got very into the story she was telling, changing her voice whenever the characters were talking and even making sound effects. It really wasn't a story that someone would normally sleep through, but Humiya couldn't keep her eyes open. When she closed them, she felt Kushina rub her hand against her head. Humiya wanted to back away from the chakra emitting from her touch, but it was so warm and comfortable. She felt safe as she was lulled into a deep slumber. Humiya knew that she was not safe. The moon appeared bigger in the opaque night sky and the silence that surrounded her was deafening. She was deep in a forest outside of Konoha, its tall trees making the area darker. Don't worry, me. It's just a nightmare. A dark nightmare. She froze when she stepped on something wet with the smell of iron overwhelming her senses. She looked down to see a bloodied chain below her. She covered her mouth at the sight and backed away from it as quickly as she could. Humiya tried to wake herself up, but nothing happened. Instead, there was a beckoning impulse for her to follow the chain that led down a path of broken trees. Trapped, she complied. She walked down the tattered path, the glow of the chain and the moon being her only light. As she walked, she heard raging roars in the distance which made her tremble. She then entered a clearing and what she saw was worse than she ever imagined. Blood was splattered everywhere and there laid Kushina and an unidentifiable man lay motionless in the middle of it, the chain that led her to this clearing ending in a gaping hole in Kushina's stomach. They both appeared to be reaching out. Above them stood the Kyuubi in all its glory, its claws covered in their blood. Suddenly, Humiya heard crying in the distance to see a baby Naruto on an altar. The Kyuubi ears twitched at the baby's cries and its eyes gleamed like a predator who found its prey. Slowly it walked, its tails thrashing. Humiya tried to move, but she stood there frozen and could only watch the beast lift its paw to squish the child. She screamed. Kyuubi, stop. Not Naruto. Not Naruto. Humiya's eyes sprang open with a gasp, only to find herself back in her room. She could still smell the blood which made her tremble. How do you know those names? Humiya's blood went cold when she turned around to see Kushina, her face ashen with her hand quivering over her stomach. She knew instantly that she talked in her sleep again and the last person she would want to hear her, had no name. No. What wrong? Scary. Anti-scary. She cried, feeling as if she was grasping straws to salvage the situation. She struggled out of bed and walked toward Kushina with her arms open. Auntie. Humiya begged, please. Kushina flinched and doubled over, making Humiya stop in her tracks. What you said, and your vision have serious meanings, tell me what you saw. Tell me the truth. Truth? She asked, her body beginning to tremble. Then, the door opened to reveal a concerned Makoto with a babbling Sasuke on her hip. I heard a commotion, Makoto said as she walked toward the pair. Is everything alright? Kushina, you look quite ill and what is Humiya doing out of bed? She asked while she readjusted little Sasuke who was sucking on his fingers. Before Kushina could reply, she hunched over in pain, her knees buckling. Makoto tried to help Kushina with her free arm, but Kushina moved away and struggled to straighten herself on her own. Makoto watched Kushina with her hand to her heart. Kushina, are you? I'm fine, there's nothing wrong, Kushina uttered as she clutched her stomach. I just got a horrible stomachache, ya know. Yeah, a stomachache. Ow, I gotta go. Humiya noticed liquid spreading across the floor. She looked toward her guardian and gasped. Mama water. There was a puff of smoke. Once it cleared, it revealed that Kushina's stomach wasn't flat but showing clear signs that she was pregnant. She looked down at the puddle on the floor in shock. I can't have him here. I can't have him here, ya know. Kushina cried as she shook her head before trying to run away. Makoto grabbed Kushina with her free hand, her eyes flashing red. Kushina stopped struggling. The contractions. I numbed them with genjutsu. It is a very fragile jutsu, so I must be touching you to cast it. Your water just broke, and the hospital is on the other side of the village, Makoto said before handing a whining Sasuke to Humiya. Humiya held Sasuke with wide eyes, him heavy in her arms. She watched as Makoto stubbornly assisted Kushina into the hallway. There is enough space in the living room for you to have your child. I have some spare futons somewhere, Makoto mumbled, more to herself than to Kushina. But Makoto, Kushina cried. And Yashira's wife worked as a midwife before she retired. Makoto, Kushina shouted before ripping herself out of Makoto's grasp in front of the stairs. You can't help me, Yano. She bent forward again with another contraction, grabbing the railing for support. Makoto stepped forward and gently grasped her hand, looking hurt. I apologize for being rash, Makoto told her softly. I will not ask you why you hid your pregnancy nor why you are so hesitant for assistance. So please, let me help you as you helped me. Kushina looked down at the stairs. Okay. I need you to contact Minato and Bawako. They need to know. And you got to listen to them when they come, she fretted. Ah, my son. He was not supposed to come yet, Yano. Makoto gave Kushina a weak smile. I understand. The doctor was not accurate with my children's date of birth either, she said as they walked down the stairs. Now, I want you to breathe deeply. You will feel your contractions once I let go, but you need to stay calm. Stress will hurt the baby. Kushina nodded before taking a deep breath. Makoto led her to the large living room and sat her down onto a seating cushion before looking back at Humiya. She let go of Kushina and took Sasuke out of Humiya's arms. I will be putting Sasuke back into his crib and will be right back. Strangers will be here to take care of Kushina. I need you to be brave, Humiya. Can you do that for me? Makoto told her softly, her voice quick. Humiya nodded and watched her guardian go upstairs and deal with Sasuke before rushing out of the door. She stared at the door in a daze, completely at a loss. She did not feel brave. She did not feel brave like Makoto wanted. Too many things were coming at her at once as she stared at the front door Makoto rushed out of. Her past life, her new life, her sickness, her deal. Her chest ached. Kushina was in labor, and the nine tails might as well come out and squish her like a bug at any moment. It's hopeless. Humiya, Kushina hissed. Humiya jumped and whipped her head toward Kushina and watched her get up from the seating cushion in the living room. Yes, Auntie. Can you tell me where you keep a spare futon? Kushina asked, breathing deeply. Humiya bit her lip, noticing how uncomfortable Kushina was. She remembered her guardian fretting about how there was enough room for a futon for Kushina to lay in. She unconsciously put a hand over her lips as she thought of where one would be. She wished that she explored the house more, but constantly being bedridden made that a bit difficult. Ah, she shouted and shot up from her spot. No, I'll get. Like a flick of a switch, she recalled how Makoto used to sleep on a futon next to her crib at night, so she could take care of her faster. She was sure that there was also one in Sasuke's room. She scurried upstairs to Sasuke's room but stopped herself from running straight in when she didn't immediately hear the baby's coos. She slowly opened the door to see Sasuke sleeping soundly in his crib. Humiya tiptoed to the closet. Inside, she saw the futon she was looking for, but it was under a heap of pillows and blankets. There were also Sasuke's baby supplies and scrolls packed neatly in it as well. Humiya grabbed onto the futon's soft fabric and pulled as hard as she could, but the bedding would not budge. So, she pulled the lighter pillows and blankets onto the floor before trying again. She accidentally hit her head on the shelf above her as she did this, making her hiss. She paused when she heard Sasuke whine and looked to see that he only shifted a bit in his sleep. Humiya continued to pull on the futon until it was successfully out. She sighed in relief when she grabbed the bottom part of it and carried it downstairs, the bedding dragging behind her. When she reached the living room, she walked in on Kushina slowly pacing across the room. I'm okay. I am fine, Yano. I got a good grip on him and freaking out will only loosen it, she said in a hushed voice. I must find out what was in her dream. Humiya was about to interrupt Kushina but felt the fiery chakra of the Kyuubi fluctuate within her. She watched Kushina groan and stagger as her chakra overtook it. Auntie! Humiya screamed, dropping the futon, and running to her side. I'm fine. Naruto pulled a surprise attack, Yano. Kushina replied as she rubbed her stomach, her voice. Did you bring the futon? He settled down, so let me help you prepare it. No. Humiya looked toward the discarded futon before jumping up from her spot. Stay. No help, she insisted before running back up the stairs to get blankets and a pillow from Sasuke's room. Humiya felt as if she was preparing Kushina's deathbed as she spread the bedding across the living room floor, panting from overexertion. She could feel red chakra within Kushina struggling to rip out of her even without focusing on it. Where's Minato when you need him? People call him the fastest man alive, and he is a turtle when you need him most, she grumbled before flinching and rubbing her belly faster. Ah, all that preparation for nothing. You were not supposed to come for another 2 weeks, Yano. Why did you have to inherit my impatience, Naruto? Auntie. Humiya panted pitifully as she walked up to her, extending one of the blankets she brought down to Kushina. Kushina turned to face her, the sweat on her face making her red hair stick to her cheek. Thank you. You are a good girl, she said softly, taking the blanket from Humiya's grasp, wrapping it around herself. Humiya went over to the futon and motioned for Kushina to come over by patting the bedding. Come down, she insisted. Yes, I should, Kushina agreed, walking over to the futon before seating herself down, placing the covers over her legs. Humiya trembled, holding the rim of her dress tightly as she sat before Kushina. She could not keep her intrusive thoughts at bay. Now that she thought about it, this moment might as well be the last time she will ever see Kushina alive before the Kyuubi breaks free and ravages the village. There was no guarantee that she would survive the attack either. She sobbed at the thought. Humiya, don't cry. I'm not mad, Yano, Kushina sighed before grabbing Humiya's small hand. This is a lot for a 3-year-old to handle. You must be so scared. Especially with your vision, she continued, her pause resulting in her taking a deep breath after another contraction passed through. Hey, look at me, Kushina urged, grabbing Humiya's small hand before giving it a small tug. Humiya shook her head and looked anywhere but at Kushina. The mat under them, the small table in the corner, the door that led to the backyard, the blood that was staining the wooden beams that lined the ceiling. Nothing in the room could distract her from the roars erupting in her mind of how screwed she was. She let out a long moan as she wept, the gravity of their situation hitting her at full force. Kushina rubbed her arm, her hands trembling. It's okay to be scared, Yano, Kushina told her before leaning into her ear. Let me tell you a secret. Humiya leaned in with a sniff, rubbing her eyes with her sleeves. People call me fearless. I have faced bad people, seen death. Kushina began, her voice soft. My life has been filled with scary things. And felt fear every time. She gave Humiya's arm a comforting squeeze. What matters is what you do when you are scared. Not if you feel it or not. Humiya wiped her face with her sleeve and swallowed the lump in her throat. She shook with fright. Scary. Anti-scary. When something scares me, I face it head on and fight it, hard. Kick its butt, Yano. Kushina replied, punching the air as if to demonstrate. Now, tell me what you saw in your dream so we can face our fears together. What you had was a prophetic dream and they are a glimpse of fate, Humiya. I have only heard of one once before. Really? Humiya asked. Yes. It was from my grandmother and if I did not listen to her, I would have died with the rest of my home village. Humiya was silent for a moment. She knew that the dreams she had were just nightmares and why she was hallucinating of her past life was beyond her. But those events in her nightmares were of what's to come and her past did happen. At that moment, she felt completely helpless. Then a thought came to her. What if telling her changes something? She looked down at Kushina's shaky hand and put her hand over it. Humiya concluded that saying nothing wouldn't fix anything, gave in to the small thought. She looked around the house as if she were about to tell a secret. Okay, but very scary, she said before organizing her thoughts and trying to translate them. Dreams no good. Night dark. Big mess. Buildings go. Boom. Boom. Buildings down. Fire and red. Red spreading. Kyuubi fault. Kushina's face paled as she clutched her stomach with her other hand, making Humiya stop in her tracks. No. Keep going. Are the buildings in the village? Where was I? She asked, still clutching Humiya's hand, and urged her forward. Humiya nodded but knew that her explanation was lacking. She tried moving her arms for more emphasis, her voice becoming more desperate as the images of those dreams came back to her. Too much red. Ground red. People red. Not moving. Kyuubi fault. All his fault, she whispered. You there in woods dark. Red chain. Led you. Naruto. She pointed to Kushina's stomach. You. Not moving. Kyuubi fault. Too red. Kyuubi. She could not say more, the images so gruesome that her limited vocabulary could hardly describe. I see. Kushina sighed before squeezing Humiya's hand with a scream. Actually, I don't see, ya know. Stupid. Stupid. Humiya tried to free herself from Kushina's grasp, feeling the fiery chakra of the Kyuubi blazing as if rejoicing over what was said. She watched as Kushina's indigo eyes flashed red and her nails began to sharpen, sinking into Humiya's fragile skin. Agreeing to Kushina's request was a huge mistake. Was it that she thought she could not dig herself a bigger hole than she already had? She knew that her Japanese was limited, but she didn't expect it to affect her this much. She screamed as the red chakra burned her wrist and Kushina clutched it tighter. You need to tell me more. I know ya know. All I got was that my worst fears will become reality. Kushina roared as she slammed her hand on the ground in a rage, her voice almost primal. How can this happen when we put up so many precautions? Are we attacked? Where is Minato? Tell me, ya know. No, 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 Humiya cried, trying to rip her hand away and run away. Kushina let out a feral cry as the Kyuubi's fiery chakra frothed around her and popped like lava. Suddenly, Humiya heard the front door slam open and a flash of yellow with harsh wind before a man appeared on the other side of Kushina. Kushina! The blonde man yelled. Humiya watched as he quickly pulled down Kushina's covers and undid her clothing to reveal a swirling black void on her stomach that was getting bigger by the second. Tears were dripping from Kushina's eyes, her clawed hands gripping the man's shirt. Minato. Minato made a hand seal before placing his hand over her stomach. All at once, the once fiery chakra was overtaken by him and sucked back into Kushina's stomach. Humiya watched as Kushina's eyes changed back to indigo and her nails retracted. It was then that she was able to escape her grasp and back away to a safe distance within the room, clutching her injured wrist close to her chest as it throbbed. She wanted to slap herself when she recognized the man. His hair and Hokage robe told her as much. His resemblance to Naruto was uncanny. You are going to be okay, Kushina. I stabilized you and will get you where you need to be, Minato said, his voice shaky as he caressed Kushina's sullen face. Humiya watched as he took his hand off her stomach and moved to pick Kushina up, but Kushina stopped him. Wait, Minato, you have to listen to me, Kushina cried, gritting her teeth as she moved his hand. We have to evacuate the village. We must do it, ya know. The prophecy foretold that the Kyuubi will attack the village. Humiya felt her stomach drop and knew that the consequences of telling Kushina her dreams were unfolding in front of her. She sat there frozen as Minato stared down at his wife and held her hand tightly. Kushina, a prophecy, like the ones from the great Toad Sage? He asked, his voice wavering. Lord Fourth, I advise you to not flash away without having me check on your wife's condition, an elderly woman called as she entered the living room with Makoto and a pair of nurses. Despite her elderly appearance, the woman had long light brown hair tied into a high ponytail with no signs of graying and sharp dark eyes ever so calculating. She wore a long purple dress with a white haori. Minato turned to face the woman, relief written all over his face. Bawako, please help her. I have never seen Kushina act this way. Of course, Kushina is not herself. She is in labor. Think of the worst pain you have ever experienced, and she is in worse pain, Bawako replied bluntly as she knelt to the feet of Kushina and clapped her hands twice. The nurse immediately rushed forward, seeming to automatically know what Bawako wanted them to do. As Bawako lifted Kushina's covers, one nurse grabbed Kushina's free hand and the other went next to Bawako with a scroll. The nurse by the elderly woman opened the scroll and medical tools and a bucket of hot water popped out of it. It is too late to move her, Minato. It is about time for Kushina to push, Bawako announced as she put on her gloves. Thankfully, we are safe here and Anbu are posted outside. Humiya was so entranced by the scene unfolding before her that she did not notice Makoto come up behind her until she scooped her up into her arms. Mama, she whimpered as she wrapped her arms around her guardian's neck. I know, Humiya. You have been very brave. Do not fret. These people are here to help Kushina, not hurt her, Makoto whispered, giving Humiya a comforting hug. She looked down at Humiya's wrist and her face morphed into one of concern fiery. Humiya, my baby, what happened to your wrist? She cried. Humiya stammered. Worry not, Makoto. One of my nurses will heal her, Bawako interjected before glancing back at the nurse stationed behind her. Thank you, Madam Sarutobi, Makoto replied with a quick bow. Humiya watched the nurse bow to Bawako before going up to them. Show me her wrist, the nurse asked, her hand glowing green. No, wait, my daughter is sensitive to chakra, Makoto stated. Understood, the nurse replied before removing her hand and taking out some bandages and ointment. Makoto looked down at the items presented and accepted it by gently taking Humiya's arm, showing it to the nurse. The nurse quickly took it and opened the jar of medicine to apply in Humiya's burn before wrapping it with a bandage. It smelt of an indistinguishable assortment of bitter herbs. Makoto, do you know the location of your husband? Minato asked, his voice calm and clear. Yes, Lord Fourth, Makoto replied simply. Humiya leaned over to see Minato writing something into a scroll. I need you to take this to your husband and to alert him that there has been an evacuation order. Makoto's face flashed with confusion before quickly appearing cordial. I see. I will give this to him right away. Makoto rushed up to Minato and took the scroll from him with a bow. Humiya bit her lip as she watched her guardian walk toward her and caress her cheek. After she is done wrapping you up, go upstairs and stay with Sasuke until I get back, she told her before walking out the door. Humiya watched her guardian leave before Kushina's cries made her look back. Humiya, please tell Minato what you saw. She cried. Maybe he can understand your baby talk, Yano. Humiya sat there frozen as Minato brought his attention to her for the first time, his face pale but eyes ever so calculating. She could feel his chakra without focusing on it like the Kyuubi. She knew that he could kill her without even blinking. She bit her lip so hard that she could taste iron. Kushina, let's not focus on a prophecy. I have already called for an evacuation order, and everything is going smoothly. All you need to worry about is delivering Naruto, and we will have a full family just like we always dreamed, Minato assured before leaning down and kiss her on her cheek. Just imagine. Kushina sniffed before shaking her head. No. There's no time. I can't, Yano. She sobbed. I can't live knowing that hundreds died for our selfish dream. I can't live. After Naruto is born. It is time to push, Kushina. Remember to push with the contraction, Bawako interjected, voice calm despite the tension. Minato quickly placed his hand back onto Kushina's stomach. On the count of 3. 3, 2, 1, push. Kushina leaned forward at the push, gritting her teeth. Kill me, please, she cried as she pushed before laying back. You have to. So selfish, aren't we? So. Ah. She cried out as she pushed again. The world around Humia became a blurry mess at Kushina's pleas for death, the fact that she was part of it sinking its claws into her heart. Ignorance truly was bliss. She couldn't move as the Kyuubi's chakra clawed at her, seeping into her skin. She could hardly breathe as she stared at the scene unfolding before her. Her heart thudded, phantom hands wrapping around her neck. She felt the familiar feeling of death staring her down. When she finally took a breath, instinct took over. She screamed at the top of her lungs before fleeing the living room, slipping on the hallway floor as she hurried toward the back door. She bumped against the side of its frame before escaping, her side surely bruised. The cries for her to come back fell on deaf ears. She did not look back. Run. Running was the one thing in her mind. She opened the back gate and ran into the dark forest, not caring which direction. Tree branches and prickly bushes slapped her, and her heart clawed in her chest, but she did not feel it. Farther. Farther into the woods. Danger was behind her. Her life demanded it. Darkness overhead skewed her vision, but it did not stop her. The sharp sticks and rocks under her feet stabbed her, but it did not stop her. It wasn't until she tripped on a stump and the feeling of being weightless stopped her. Her vision began to spin as she rolled down a hill. Her breath struck out of her when a tree broke her descent. Her body slammed against the ground. She gasped a few strangled breaths before she tried to push herself up to run again, but the pain sprang up her leg and made her fall onto the leafy ground. She screamed and tried again and again, slamming her fist with every failed attempt. Her endless attempts to get up turned into her just slamming the groan and screaming, the anger and sadness of her condition flowing out of her. Soon, those screams became mute with her voice hoarse and only silent tears escaped her. Once her tears had dried and most of her energy left her, she turned over and looked up at the trees that loomed over her. She did not know how much time passed as she took shaky breaths. The pain from her injuries became more prevalent. Her whole body throbbed, and it struck with every breath she took. Helplessness. That sickening feeling gnawed at her. The feeling that came and went in waves throughout this pitiful life of hers. It bogged her down to the muddy spot. She didn't even notice the small flame that zipped toward her. I found you, Itachi panted, his voice frantic. Humia jumped when she saw his face. Itachi looked her up and down, poking here and there with an intensity she hadn't seen before. She was too weak to stop him even when he touched her throbbing ankle. He breathed a sigh of relief. Cuts, bruises, and a sprained ankle, he stated before digging his hand into his back pouch to take out supplies. Nothing basic aid and few nights rest won't fix. Humia hiccuped as she watched him open a tin of ointment and put it on her wounds and bruises, his hands precise and experienced. Her mind began to drift as a pleasant smell caressed her nose and the cooling sensation from the ointment turned her stabbing pain into an endurable throb. It was much more pleasant than the nurse's medicine. Hinoki. She said nothing as he continued, her body drained, but she noticed his hands tremble with each wrap of the bandage. Sorry, Itachi whimpered. I should have been there to protect you. I was on my way home when I heard you screaming. And I couldn't find you. It sounded as if he was trying to hold back a lump in his throat. When you stopped, I feared the worst. Humia never heard Itachi sound like this before. He was usually calm and collected, always in control. Ninja never cries. Ninja never. He chanted under his breath as he continued his work, blinking rapidly with a look of shame. She lifted her now bandaged hand and patted his pant leg and mouthed, Ida, to comfort him. Instead of giving him any sort of solace, it seemed to have made him feel worse. His silent sniffs quickly morphed into desperate gurgles until a sob finally escaped him. She felt a few droplets fall into her eyes and down her cheeks. Despite his crying, Itachi did not stop his task of patching her up and did it as gently as his little hands could. Despite Humia's vision being blurred by tears, she saw him clearer than ever before. The conniving image of a boy who would kill her when she was older shattered to reveal the 5-year-old boy he was. The anime be damned. This was her brother, not some ruthless character from a show. Itachi the character might kill her, but not him. Not her brother. Shame filled her as she struggled to push herself up. Do not move, Itachi hiccuped as he whipped the mucus off his face with his arm. I am not finished. You cannot move until I am done. Humia pulled him in for a hug and leaned his head on her shoulder. Sorry, she whispered. Was bad. Humia, you do not need to be sorry, Itachi sniffed as he returned the hug, avoiding all her bandages. He gave her a light squeeze. Can you tell me what happened? Itachi asked as he let go of their embrace. Humia hesitantly nodded, knowing that Itachi would understand her better at least. Kushina visited. Gave gifts. But baby. Had baby at home. Said wrong and ran away, she said with head down and holding the hem of her now muddied dress. I am sure they will understand why you ran away. It is quite a shock that the Hokage's wife is giving birth at our home, Itachi rambled as he put his medical supplies away. And if they do not understand, I will explain it to them. You must have been very overwhelmed. Mother and father would understand, and I am sure Kushina would too. They must be very worried since you ran away. Itachi paused for a second. Now I think about it, Makoto would have followed you and Mama with Papa. Out. Humia added typing to get up but flinched, her body sore. Itachi frowned at that before turning around and motioning to his back. You are in no condition to walk on your own. Let me carry you home. K. She replied before wrapping her arms around his neck. Humia could not believe she did not notice how drained she felt before he said that. She might feel significantly better with the medical treatment, but all that running and screaming could knock anyone out. Whatever happens, I promise that I will get stronger. No, the strongest ninja alive, Itachi assured as effortlessly he hauled her onto his back, giving her a piggyback ride. Humia shook her head as she tightened her grip. No. Itachi glanced back at her with confusion. What do you mean no? I need to protect you from all the bad that might come at us. No, she said again with more momentum. She did not want to just be protected, nor did she want her emotions to roar out like they did. Her mind might as well regress to that of a child with what she did, or she never truly matured in her past life. Whatever it was, she needed to grow stronger to do what she needed to do. Then a memory of what Itachi said in the past came to her mind and reached down to grab his hand. Strength shared so both strong, Humia told him, her mind clear. Fight for me, no. Fight together. Together. Itachi blinked at her outburst before giving her a small comforting smile. Okay. Get better and let's grow stronger together. Humia watched her trees pass by in a blur as Itachi climbed up the hill and ran through the woods, anticipating what's to come. A part of her wanted to believe that she was overreacting. She was 3 years old after all. Humia did not want to think about the dangers ahead and think only happy thoughts, but reality always had its ways of reminding her. Itachi stopped and his body tensed, making her tighten her grip. What, Ron? Shish. He whispered before looking around and slowly stepped forward. She scrunched her brows at his sudden demands and looked ahead. She looked up at the lights of their house which illuminated their path. Nothing could have set him off until she looked down. She covered her mouth in horror. In front of them, a masked man laid motionless, the smell of blood making her cover her mouth. Itachi jumped up into the branches above and looked at the backyard. She could hear a baby crying from the living room. She could deduce that Naruto was born. Her heart stopped when she saw a man in black robes and swirl markings on his white mask phase through the gate and into the house. She rubbed her eyes when she saw it, thinking it was a ghost until screams erupted and part of the house exploded. She hid her face behind Itachi's in horror as a wave of heat and wooden debris scraped her. The chickens clucked in panic and fled into the woods. She wanted to flee too, but the yells and the clings of metal made fear she felt when she faced Kushina a mundane worry. When she gained the confidence to look up, the part of the house where the living room was supposed to be was on fire, flaming debris scattering the once pristine backyard. She looked toward the window where Sasuke's room was and it thankfully looked unscathed, but the fire looked to be spreading. Sasuke, Itachi whispered as he ran to the edge of the branch and jumped into the window of Sasuke's room. They looked and saw the room untouched with Sasuke lying in his crib uninjured but weeping with fright, his body shivering and his face wet with tears and snot. Yumiya got off Itachi and sat herself down onto the floor, watching her brother quickly grab a sling from his messy closet. He took the howling Sasuke out of his crib and into the sling before shushing him as he rocked. But it did little to stop Sasuke's cries. Yumiya closed her eyes and felt only two flames shining dimly, one brighter than the other. She felt her body ice over, knowing that there should be more and that she recognized the flame that struggled so dimly. "Mama!" she cried, hastily trying to get up and go to the living room, but the pain from her ankle stopped her. Yumiya quickly got up and flinched when she put into her sprained ankle. But that didn't stop her from. Itachi then presented her back to her and she hopped onto his back before they headed downstairs to the destroyed living room. Blood splattered with the midwife's assistants dead on the floor. Kushina was no longer in her futon, it now lay bloodied and bare before them. There was a fiery hole where the wall used to be, and a hanging piece of fiery wood fell onto the ground. But Yumiya could care less of the state of the house when Makoto lay there, bloodied with Bawako over her with her hands glowing green over her stomach. "Mama!" Yumiya cried as Itachi ran over to the pair. Makoto opened her eyes and looked up at them, eyes glossed over and breathing shallow. She lifted her hand up and Itachi grabbed it. "You're all alive, thank Naka," she cried relief before hastily adding, "You have to leave." Itachi looked up at Bawako and demanded, "What happened here? We were ambushed by a masked man and your mother protected me. Now, listen to your mother and run head to the shelter," Bawako replied, not looking away from her healing. Yumiya watched Makoto's eyes flutter and wanted to gag at the coppery smell of blood. She couldn't stop staring at the source. Along with small cuts littering her guardian's body, a large gaping wound that went along her side that seemed to be closing slowly with Bawako's chakra. "It's better than it looks, so do not worry," Makoto urged. "Itachi, I need you to run as fast as you can. But we will be fine. Reinforcements will come," Bawako added. Yumiya shook her head. "No leave. No, no," she cried, feeling her guardian's flame fading away. Makoto coughed and a heap of blood came out her mouth, her hand slipping from Itachi's grasp. "I will take care of your mother. Focus on your survival. Go," Bawako barked. Yumiya reached out to them as Itachi got up and slowly backed away. She didn't know what to think as her guardian lay wounded. So much blood. So much red. All she saw was red as her vision became clearer than it had ever been. "Go," Bawako repeated, intent leaking out of her. "Mama!" Yumiya screamed as Itachi turned to run away. He rushed out of the house and into the chaotic street, not looking back. A crowd of people were outside and rushing in the same direction with men in police uniform guiding them. Yumiya clung to him like a lifeline as Itachi waved through the mass of people. She thought her tears were dry, but they came with new vigor as Makoto's wounded body and desperate face showed clearly in her mind's eye. "We have to go to the shelter," he mumbled to himself. Sasuke's cries were reduced to weak whimpers, but a strong gust of wind made him scream. Humiya felt a huge wave of chakra suddenly appear from above and she knew what it was by its intense killing intent. She jerked up at the sky and screamed as she pointed, Kyuubi. The nine-tailed fox appeared from above and crashed into the middle of the village, the impact sending waves of destruction in all directions. Chaos ensued. Humiya couldn't keep her eyes away from the Kyuubi as it stood at a distance, its nine tails flicking in all directions, crashing into buildings. She wanted to cover her ears as it let out a blood-curdling roar before clawing at the building around him, the waves from his cries exploding building and sending them and people up in the air. Look out! She screamed. No one was safe as the Kyuubi wreaked havoc. The crowd around them scrambled in horror as the debris came hurtling toward them. Itachi quickly grabbed Humiya, ripping her off his back and onto the ground before covering her and Sasuke with his body. She closed her eyes and covered her ears, but she still heard the cries of the unfortunate and the sound of debris colliding with the ground around them. Miraculously, none of the heavy debris hit them and Humiya opened her eyes when the crashing around them subsided, and the ground stopped shaking. She swallowed bile when she saw those who weren't so lucky, her tears not obscuring her vision. The bodies of the unfortunate scattered across the wreckage, their bloodied bodies in different states of mutilation and homes caved in. Itachi quickly covered her eyes with his hand, Sasuke screaming in the other. Do not look, he said, his voice eerily calm. Only look at what is in front of us. He took his hand away from her face and turned around to put Humiya back on his back. She wrapped his neck and her legs around his waist before he broke into a run. She saw that the path they were previously taking was now blocked by a massive piece of building, so Itachi ran down desolate streets and back alleys, occasionally jumping over rocks and weaving around scattered pieces of houses. As they went, the sound of a desperate girl's cries was heard in the distance. Mom! She called frantically before coughing. Mom! Itachi turned a corner and she saw a small girl who looked not much older than Itachi. Her dark brown hair was covered in gray dust and her purple long-sleeved shirt was tattered. The girl's brown eyes looked dazed as she called out once more. Humiya looked up and saw the largest piece of a building hurling toward them and she quickly slapped Itachi's back to get his attention on it before pointing it at the girl with a whine. Come on, she screamed, getting the girl's attention. He leapt into the alleyway and pulled the girl out of it before the rubble colliding with the building crushed them. Dust surrounded them, making Humiya cough and clutch Itachi's body tighter. Luck seemed to be on their side once again, for she only felt sharp pebbles hit her already bandaged body. Once the dust cleared, she saw the little girl on the ground, battered but all right as well. She looked as if she was Itachi's age. Have you seen my mom? She cried as she looked around them. Humiya and Itachi shook their heads at the same time. The little girl then stared at Humiya. Sharingan, she whispered. Shelter. Humiya cried. Shelter. Humiya's right. We have no time to look for your mother and we must head to the shelter to be safe, Itachi continued before grabbing her girl's hand. Follow me. But mom, the girl cried as she tried to pull her hand back, but Itachi's grip was too strong. Your mom most likely would be there as well, he added before running again, dragging the girl with them. Humiya looked back at the girl and saw her biting her lip but was keeping up with Itachi's pace. And they were off, weaving through buildings and over wreckage as the ground occasionally shook from the Kyuubi's howls and buildings getting destroyed. Humiya felt herself lose her grip but quickly held on, her aching arms screaming for her to let go. Itachi's pacing began to quicken when they saw more alive people than dead, all rushing toward the same destination. They followed, the sounds of rushing water and demanding shouts filling their ears the more they ran. Head to the southeast shelters. The voices cried. To the southeast shelters. They came to a clearing to see that everyone was running toward the Hokage monument, the Hokage's faces being a beacon of hope for Humiya's sore eyes. She noticed that the people heading to the side of the mountain were small buildings hanging along the monument wall, safe from view and from Kyuubi's destruction. At the base of it was a wooden bridge over a raging river that they all had to cross to get to the shelter. Shelter. Humiya cried with relief, pointing at it with excitement. Itachi then slowed to a stop to survey the crowd, confusing her greatly. Humiya was about to slap the back of his head but stopped herself when she saw where her brother was looking. Amongst the people was Fugaku with others in police uniform, some directing the scattered crowd to line up to cross the bridge while others aided the injured. Their father stood tall with his arms crossed, grimacing as he surveyed his surroundings. He did not seem to notice them. Go on ahead, Itachi told the girl after he stopped in his tracks, making the girl look at him with confusion. Humiya thought Itachi was crazy. She knew that Fugaku was just fine without them and her aches in her arms and legs were increasing by the second. It would be better for them to go to the shelter and go to him afterward. But we are so close. The girl insisted, pulling Itachi's hand toward the bridge. Come on, we can go to our parents after. No go, shelter. Humiya added, shaking Itachi's shoulders for emphasis. My dad is the head of police. He is amongst those policemen, Itachi replied, motioning over to the policeman with his head as he rocked the whimpering Sasuke. It will be quick. Humiya shook him some more. Come on, she whined. I have to show him that we are all right, Itachi said bluntly, letting go of the girl's hand. The girl brought her hands close to her chest before looking at the bridge and back at them. Fine, she whimpered. Find me when you get to the shelter, okay? I'm Izumi. Itachi, her brother replied with a slight bow. Izumi gave them a sad smile before running into the crowd heading toward the bridge. Humiya frowned as she watched Izumi run to the bridge, wishing Itachi wasn't so stubborn. Follow, whines weakly in a last-ditch effort to persuade her brother. We have to go see father, Humiya. He must know that we are all right, Itachi told her as he ran over Fugaku. Father, he called, catching his attention. Fugaku looked down at them, his sour expression unchanged as he looked them up and down. I knew you would get here all right. Head to the shelter, he commanded before going back to assessing the crowd. Humiya puffed out her cheeks at him. He could at least act concerned. Itachi nodded and turned around to do what he was instructed, looking back at their father for a second before running into the crowd as they went to the bridge. It groaned as they crossed it. Itachi tried to weave through the crowd but couldn't be due to how tightly packed everyone was. Despite the bridge's wooden frame, it held them up fine, but Humiya felt her heart quicken due to its sinking due to the weight of everyone. Mixed with her anxiety was rejoicing anticipation, for they were rejoicing anticipation as they were already nearly halfway across. However, that solace was short-lived. The Kyuubi let out another reverberating howl, causing the river to rage and the bridge to tremble. She looked up to see the Kyuubi waving its claws at flashes of light and dots as if he were swatting at flies. Then let out a final roar of outrage before being pushed out of the village by some force. Humiya would have been celebrating this development if the massive fragments of building and slabs of stone hadn't been thrown toward them by the beast. Policemen shouted to protect the bridge and tried to break down the rocks, but there was too much debris. Panic ensued as the wreckage hit the bridge. People shrieked and bawled as they tried to get off the bridge, trampling whoever was in their way to avoid getting hit. Humiya knew that her luck had run out the moment. Someone bumped into her, and her arms gave out. She heard a huge crack as the bridge broke with her descension. Everything was in slow motion as she watched Itachi look back in utter horror as they both fell. Ida! Humiya yelled, reaching out for him. Everything went black as she hit the water with a thud. She hoped the blinding light of death would not come to consume her, but only darkness did. Humiya waited for the blinding light of death to consume her, but it never came. Instead, the abyss spat her back into consciousness, blessing her with a coughing fit and torso deep in a cold river. I'm alive. She blinked rapidly, the sun shining in her eyes with the sounds of trickling water and the rustle of trees surrounding her. Her body throbbed terribly, shivering as the autumn wind bit at her. She could hardly lift her head from the shore, so she continued to lay there, her cheek pressed into the mud. With her limited view, she could see that she was in a forest's riverbank and that it was early morning. The bank was shallow with different shapes of mossy rocks. The river water was so clear that she could see the rocky bottom. Yumiya stared at the scenery in a daze until she realized that she was alone, Itachi nor anyone else in sight. Memories of what happened to her whirled in her mind. Ida, she called, her voice croaky and sore. Ida, where are they? Are they alive? She didn't know where she gathered the strength. She looked all around her before lifting herself up to drag herself out of the water. Her muscles screamed and her cuts burned, but she focused on her arms and made sure they moved one after the other. She let her left leg drag, for she knew any pressure on her sprained ankle would make it worse. Anomaly. Yumiya froze at the voice, wondering if she imagined it. Anomaly. A multitude of voices echoed, deep and otherworldly. Anomaly. It crowed before pecking her again, bruising her hand. Fear and confusion gripped her as she brought her hands over her face. With how big the bird was, it could poke her eyes out with one peck. It wasn't long before its friends came as well. One grabbed Yumiya's finger before tugging at it while the others surrounded her, some pecking at her body while others flew on top of her. She thought she was going to die from their excruciating pecks, but oddly they didn't. In fact, she felt shadowy chakra seep out of them and into her mind, making the pain and discomfort she felt like a mere illusion. Genjutsu. Yumiya stared at the crows in surprise as she sat up, shocked with how easy it was. Especially with all the crows standing all over her. She had to check to see that her wounds were still there, cuts, bruises, and the bandages Itachi applied gone. She knew that she shouldn't walk on her swollen ankle despite the lack of pain. Tenderly, she walked forward, careful not to put too much weight on it. Anomaly. The crows cried before one that was biting her finger flew up to her shoulder. The other crows hopped off her and down the river, looking as if they wanted her to follow. Coming, she whispered, quite bewildered. She stood up and began to walk amongst the murder. Was she dreaming? Whatever it was, a small part hoped that they were leading her to Itachi. He did always have crows with him in the manga, didn't he? He must be waiting for me. But she had come to realize that things never really go as hoped. In the distance she spotted a person laying on their side, feet still in the water and black hair obscuring their face. The closer Yumiya got, the more she wanted to stop. Her mere thought seemed to throw the crows into a frenzy, some biting at her drenched clothes while others tugged and nipped at her ankles. All pushing at once. No option but forward. She trembled as she hobbled closer, dragging her feet, eyes fixed on the corpse. Far too soon, she towered above it. The crows went deathly silent, all following her slightest twitch. She never noticed, her sole focus on the body in front of her. Yumiya shakily covered her mouth, her stomach crawling as if something was trying to claw its way back up. There had been so much death. Flashes of crowds in a frantic race to safety filled her mind, bodies strewn across their path. Worse were the victims partially under the rubble, arms reaching out and eyes fixed in the horror of their final moments. All of it tattooed to her mind's eye. This one had long black hair and a familiar symbol sewn on the back of their kimono and, Yumiya gasped as her lungs refused to breathe. She fell to her knees. Makoto. Kra. She gasped as one of the crows tugged at the hair, the woman's head flopping towards her. She cried out only to shriek in a mixture of relief and horror. It wasn't Makoto, but half her face was heavily bruised, doing little to relieve the bile building in the back of her throat. She looked too much like Makoto. Those last images of Makoto overlapped with the corpse. The desperation in her eyes, blood oozing with each heartbeat from her side. She could smell that horrible mixture of burning smoke and blood. She shuddered before she felt a crow pecking her cheek, hard. Ah! She cried at the sting, the vision vanishing as quickly as it had come. The crow on her shoulder pecked her again and she swatted it off her shoulder. The moment it took flight, all the pain she felt came back in full force. She screamed as she fell to the muddy ground, withering on her side, facing the dead woman. The corpse's glossy eyes looked up and stared into hers. The woman should not be alive in her state, her clothes in tatters and black hair back to obscuring the bruised part of her face from the chilling wind. Her skin was pale and discolored, almost translucent. It looked like nature would have its way with her at any moment. The woman then wrapped her hand around Humia's arm like a vice, making tears stream down her face from the pain. Sweet anomaly. The woman cried, her mouth ajar and unmoving. It is an auspicious day. First, I found that my dear Indra's incarnate survived and now the crows brought you here safely. Humia stared trembling under the woman's grip. The crow she swatted off circled once before resettling on her shoulder, its chakra slowly making the pain she was experiencing drift away. How could she not have known the one who orchestrated all of this? Only one deity called her by that name. Naka. A rancid smile appeared in response. In the flesh. The body the goddess inhabited coughed and wheezed, making Humia recoil. She wished she had a projection of the goddess rather than this. Apologies, child. I need a medium to be a part of this world and this woman's final moments were the only one you could reach. But be not concerned, her body will be used to properly compensate the crows. Humia scrunched her brow, confused. How? Naka smiled. Why through deals, of course. An agreement is one of the most powerful things that you can do in this world. Just like you get to keep your memories from my eyes, she gets to return to me knowing that her little Izumi lived, and the crows have an opportunity to properly feed their young. A trade where all benefit is always for the best. Humia gulped, not knowing which to fear more, the deal Naka made with the crows or what Naka needed to tell her. So, I must be quick. Humia gasped as pain lanced through her wrist as Naka's grip impossibly tightened further. I feel his presence forming in this world. Beware, anomaly. Beware of Jashin. Humia scrunched her brow, confused. She had never heard of that name before. Who? Jashin. Naka cried. A god far worse than the Shinigami himself. The abomination seeks to walk amongst the living and will do anything to get it. Even steal souls. Only death and destruction will come if he succeeds. Naka let go of Humia and began to draw a small circle with an upside-down triangle in the middle into the mud. Humia stared at the symbol drawn. Her eyes flicked to the symbol and back at Naka, noticing the body she was inhabiting deteriorating by the minute. She flinched as part of the body's cheek fell away to reveal the bone beneath. This symbol connects him to the world. If you see it drawn in blood, flee. Do not step into it, for if you enter, he will know what you are and you will be his. Do you understand? Humia nodded. That crooked smile reappeared at the gesture, her shoulders sagging. Good. Now I must go. The crows are waiting. They will take you to a safe place. She then grabbed Humia's cheek, making her shriek in surprise. Remember our deal. I would be displeased if you failed to fulfill our bargain. Humia nodded again more feverishly before Naka let go. She watched the goddess let out her final breath, her eyes remained fixed to Humia's. Suddenly, cries echoed from the trees. Hundreds, no thousands of crows descended from every tree, covering the body in moments. The whole mass moved in unison into the bushes and out of sight. Of the body, there was not a trace. The crow pecked her temple, causing her to lose consciousness yet again. But this time, the darkness was welcomed. Humia dreamt of nothing as she slept only to have a rude awakening with something spicy in her mouth. Ack! She screamed, trying to spit it out, but inadvertently swallowed it instead. Grandma Sancho, she's awake. A little boy cried before running away. Humia looked around to find herself inside a small room, laying on a futon. It was a run-down room with cracks littering its wooden frame. It reminded her of a cottage. She looked down on the floor to see a bowl filled with the hot contents that still burned her mouth. Curry. How did I? Goodness, Karashi, you're right. I knew the curry would do the trick. An old woman cried as she entered the room, her little boy gripping her side. Sancho was short with a kind aura, like a grandmother who would always offer sweets and good fortune to whoever came her way. She had long gray hair that was wrapped in a yellow baggy hat with her bands tied on the sides of her face. She also wore thick round glasses over her small beady eyes that made them look smaller than they were. The small boy named Karashi held the woman's navy blue apron as he stared at her, looking nothing like his grandmother. He had light brown hair that was tied in a ponytail and wore similar clothes to the old woman, but his outfit was light brown. What was most notable was his eyes, a beautifully deep purple. It made Humia's heart ache as the image of Kushina came to her mind the more she gazed into them, so she looked away. She must be dead now. Humia blinked as a calloused, yet tender hand was placed on her forehead. She looked into Sancho's soulful black eyes, and she was mesmerized by their depth. Just as quickly as her calming gaze appeared, she squinted away. Looks like your fever broke, she mumbled to herself before addressing Humia directly. I can tell you've been through a lot, young one. Please, lay back and rest. I'll fetch some water for you. Karashi, please watch her. Yes, Grandma Sancho, Karashi replied before kneeling by Humia's side. With a satisfied nod, the old woman slowly moved away, her steps heavy despite her light frame. Once out of sight, Karashi seemed to deflate into his seat. He took out a block of wood with a pocketknife and absently scrapped many nicks on it. Looking closely, Humia realized that it almost looked like a crow. She also noticed he wasn't paying much attention to it, hands shaking and blade unsteady. He stopped a moment to look her way and gasped when he noticed her watching him. He set the block and knife aside and fidgeted in his seat. His lips parted several times as if to speak only to close as if he wanted to say something but didn't know how to start. Sancho came back with a glass before Karashi could get a word out. When Karashi told me that crows came and led him to you, I was quite shocked. I could hardly imagine what could have led to such an event, she sighed as she handed Humia the drink. Humia's parched mouth trembled at the wooden bowl covered in nicks and slashes, a light blue color all but worn away. She snatched it, rivulets of the cool liquid dribbling around her cheeks as she tried to drink it all the faster. Thanks, she mumbled, the cup slipping from her fingers. She wiped the remaining water from her mouth with her hand. The other light tugged on the elderly woman's sleeve, remembering Itachi and Sasuke. Brother. Baby. Seen boy like me? Humia asked, her throat still sore. Shish, child. Don't speak and rest, Sancho replied, pushing her back onto the futon. We did not see anyone with you where we found you. We can look for him once you're better, okay? Humia hesitantly obeyed, feeling too drained to argue. She leaned back into the futon and looked out her open window at the foreign trees. She knew that she must be far from Konoha based on her savior's clothing, and hoped it wasn't too far. Right now, she had to get better and find out how to get back. Humia stopped counting how long she had been living in Sancho's curry restaurant by day 2, trapped again in a perpetual state of being bedridden. The only difference was that she ate curry every single day. She ate the spicy dish so much that she wanted to barf, but the opposite happened. In fact, Humia felt better with every passing day. It's the curry, Sancho would say. Good nutrition can heal all ailments, love. Everyone knows that. Humia doubted that. How can a simple bowl of curry heal birth defects? Reality found a way, not that she was complaining. She no longer had pain grip her heart nor did her fingers randomly turn a scary shade of blue. Her ankle also healed in no time and the cuts on her body left no scars. Best to not think too deeply about it. especially in this world. By the time she was free from the bedroom, she developed this burst of energy. She could run, and she was running. Through the halls, around the building. Everywhere. Humia must have made Sancho's head whirl because the elderly woman placed her outside, exasperated. She directed her to tell people who come close that it is closed until she called her inside for breakfast. A pretty useless job, in Humia's mind. So there she was, sitting in front of the restaurant, swinging a stick and yelling, "Closed!" to every passerby who walked down the dirt road. Eventually, the road cleared, and with that emptiness came her thoughts. And sometimes, it was best not to think. "I'm screwed," Humia whispered as she drew swirls in the dirt. She knew that she had to get back to Konoha as soon as possible, but she was at a loss on how to do it. She couldn't just waltz back in this 3-year-old body of hers, nor could she ask Sancho to take her back. The elderly woman did so much for her already. She just couldn't bring herself to bring it up. A tap on her shoulder drew her out of her thoughts. "Wah!" she shouted, jumping from her spot. Humia whipped her head back to see a sweaty Karashi, clutching the hand that he used to tap her and mumbling something. Humia shuffled her body toward the 8-year-old boy, leaning slightly forward to hear a semblance of what he was trying to say, not that it helped much. Karashi reminded Humia of a kettle, his face turning red as if heating up and on the verge of boiling over. I didn't mean to scare you," he exploded, trembling and balling his fists. "Okay," Humia said with a nod. Karashi opened one eye, looking like he was waiting for something to happen. Humia just blinked, already used to his antics. His shoulders relaxed after a few moments of silence and opened his other eye. Humia guessed whatever he was worried never happened. He inched closer. Grandma told me to check up on you after I was done with my chores." "Okay," Humia said again, in the same nonchalant manner. This was the most that Karashi had ever talked to her. He would usually be running for the hills by now, so this was progress. She looked at the ground and continued with her drawings. Swirls littered the ground, but the drawings became more intricate the more she drew. Now, she was drawing a willow tree with flowy branches and leaves. Humia glanced at Karashi, who was in the same place, rummaging through his pocket before taking out a wooden figure. "This is for you," he said, presenting it to her. I hope you like it." Humia looked down at the figure before gently taking it out of Karashi's hands. She marveled at the craftsmanship, its lack of detail not deterring from the skill she saw with her artistic eye. She smiled and ran her hand over the smooth wood. "Pretty crow," she said with a smile. Karashi beamed and inched close to her face, his purple eyes sparkling. Do you really think so?" He beamed. "Yeah," Humia said, backing away a little. Karashi seemed to have noticed this, so he backed away before kneeling down next to her. I like what you drew as well," he said, pointing to her drawing. Humia hummed in reply, drawing another leaf into the ground. "Ka." Humia and Karashi both looked up toward the sound. A crow the size of her fluttered in front of them from a tree, a white mark shaped as a lotus in its, the same mark that was on her ankle. She backed away from the beast when she saw the mark. Karashi backed away as well, trembling at the sight of it. "Come," the crow cawed. "Hurry." Humia froze, wondering why of all people it needed help from her. She wasn't over her last encounter with those creatures. She could still see the murder surrounding that woman's body, the stench of rotting flesh. She covered her mouth, bile rising in her throat. Luckily, like a knight in shining armor, Sancho ran out of the restaurant with a broom. "Get! You pesky thing! Get!" the elderly woman shouted, swatting the bird with her broom. The crow hissed before flying away. "Are you all right?" she cried, assessing them. Karashi teared up and ran into Sancho's arms. Humia watched the bird fly away, shoulders still tense. She knew it would be back. "Thank goodness it is gone. Come along," Children, breakfast is ready. We have a long day ahead of us. Humiya looked up at Sancho, who was patting the head of the still crying Karashi. What's happening? She asked. Sancho smiled. We are going to the market, love. Now, clean yourself up before you eat. You two are covered in dirt. Humiya did as she was told and went to the bathroom to prepare herself for the day. She wore Karashi's clothes that he outgrew. His tan shirt fit her more like a loose dress, and she had rolled up his baggy pant legs. Her small hands did not maneuver her long hair well, and it took her a while to braid. Especially when it touched her lower, held one of her dark brown fishtail pigtails, caressing the familiar pattern. Memories of how her mom in her past life taught her how to do these, the hours she was taught how to braid using dolls, and finally doing her own hair. It made her sigh. She tied the ends of it with string. After she was done, Humiya walked down the stairs to see a plate of buns on the table. She took one and took a bite out of it, tasting the savory filling inside. Of course it's curry. She took another bun, looking around the empty dining room and kitchen. It wasn't until she heard the bray of a mule that she thought to check outside. There she found Sancho and Karashi setting up a wagon. Humiya decided to sit on the front steps and watch as she finished her breakfast. Come on, Cumin, you stubborn mule, Karashi shouted, pulling on the lasso of the animal. The mule lifted its lips at Karashi and stuck his tongue out in defiance, towering over the boy. Humiya couldn't help but smile a little. Karashi, how many times have I told you to be patient with Cumin? Sancho scowled, taking the lasso and leading Cumin to the front of the wagon. You have to look forward and lead him confidently. Don't look back. But I did do that, Karashi mumbled as he climbed onto the wagon, his eyes still red from earlier. Sancho's eyes met with Humiya's and smiled. Come along and make yourself comfortable on the wagon, Humiya. It is time to go, Sancho called, motioning her after she finished tying Cumin to the wagon. Humiya complied and walked over, only to find the wagon too tall for her to get in on her own. She went onto her tippy toes and grabbed onto the ledge to attempt to pull herself up. Screw this small body. Here, let me help, Karashi said with his hand out. Humiya grabbed it and he pulled her up. Thanks, she said. Karashi nodded in reply as he closed the back of the wagon and tied it. Are you ready? Sancho asked as she climbed into the front. Ready, Grandma, Karashi called. And we're off, Sancho cried before flicking her reins. The mule let out a loud whinny, stomping his hoof on the ground. Oh, calm yourself, Cumin. It is only a short trip, Sancho said, flicking the reins again. Cumin started to move forward down the dirt road at a granny-like pace, slow but consistent. The mule seemed to drag its feet as it clopped. The wagon shook a little each time they rolled over one of the rocks that littered the road. Humiya grabbed onto the sides of the wagon, fearing that she might fall from a big bump. Your hair, Karashi said, sitting comfortably across from her. It looks nice. I've never seen it done that way. Oh, Mom showed me, Humiya replied solemnly, tilting her head and twiddling the end of her braid. It felt like straw between her fingers. Mom, do you mean Ma? He asked, leaning in closer. Where you from? Humiya frowned. She did not understand why Karashi was so excited over her pronunciations. Sure, Karashi and Sancho's have an accent, but she couldn't be far from Konoha. I was only river bound for a night at most. If you want, he retracted timidly. Konoha, she finally said. Konoha, Karashi repeated, confused. Never heard of it. Humiya's eyes widened at his reply, alarms blaring in her head. He turned to Sancho, who was mumbling rigmaroles to Cumin. Grandma, ever heard of Konoha? He asked. Konoha? Why, of course I know of it. Konoha is that hidden ninja village over in Fire Country, Sancho said. Why you mean the giant country right above us? One filled with ninja? Karashi asked. Yes, you have made quite the journey. I imagine, Sancho said to Humiya. No fire country, Humiya shouted. Karashi shook his head. And no, this is river country. Humiya leaned back onto the wagon. A whole other country. How long had I been drifting down that river? She felt her chances of even getting back there begin to dwindle. How far? She asked pitifully. Oh, not too far. About a week's journey by wagon, Sancho told her. Most merchants pass by the village on their journey to trade in Konoha, but the cost to pass the fire country border is quite expensive. Humiya hung her head. With the looks of things, I won't be returning through them. And of course, there is going to be a cost. Just perfect. How? She whimpered. You mean how much, love? Sancho asked, scratching her chin. Humiya nodded. The exact price has left me, but I do remember almost fainting when I saw it, the old woman said. Humiya hung her head, her eyes watery. Ah, do not fret, Humiya. I know that you miss your home, but you are safe with Karashi and I, Sancho said, reaching over and patting her head. I know how it feels to lose a loved one. That sinking feeling in your heart will lessen in time. Humiya didn't reply, looking out at the forest. I can't be trapped here. I don't care if it takes me years, I am going to get back to Konoha. Makoto and Fugaku must be worried sick about me or worse, think I'm dead. Sancho gave Humiya a comforting smile before turning back to the road. Suddenly, a loud craw came from above. Humiya looked up. It was back. The crow was in mid-flight, its wings covering the sun before it glided onto the wagon. It grabbed her with its sharp talons, pulling her up into the air. Hurry! Come! Hurry! The crow cried. Karashi let out a high-pitched scream before hiding in one of the barrels while Sancho whacked at it while grabbing Humiya by her leg. Human made a loud bray before galloping forward, making the wagon shake. None of the chaos affected the bird one bit. It only let out a low craw, it almost sounded like a chuckle. Humiya glared at the crow, hissing as its claws sank into her skin. Ack! Humiya cried. Away! Away! She cried, waving her hands at it. She wanted nothing to do with this crow nor any crows for that matter. Hang in there, Humiya! Sancho screamed, one hand on the rein and the on her ankle. Humiya couldn't take the tugging and bit the crow in the leg, making it let go with a squawk of pain. She felt her pigtails slap her face as she was pulled down and landed on Sancho's lap. Got you, she said as she whipped the reins forward. Ya, Human. The mule brayed and began to gallop. Humiya looked back and watched the crow turn into a black speck in the distance. They finally made it to the village. The Katabami Gold Mine Village, Sancho called it. For a mining village, Humiya imagined the place to be more desolate. The place might have been dusty with rundown buildings, but it was booming. Along the dirt roads of the town square, people of diverse backgrounds crowded the streets. The open stands stationed in front of many buildings were not as elaborate nor colorful as the market in Konoha, but it still had bounds of people calling for those curious to buy whatever they were selling. But Humiya didn't pay much attention to the sights, her mind filled with wonder on what that crow wanted from her. She looked up at the sky for the large demonic creature, but she only saw a blue sky with the occasional cloud. Is that crow gone? Karashi asked her, peeking from outside of the barrel. Yes, Karashi, Sancho said, slowing Human down as they rode down the crowded streets. That crow gave us quite a scare. Thanks goodness it's gone. She grabbed onto the rails as they went to a shaky halt. They stopped at a booth where an elderly man sold baskets of colorful spices. Sancho smiled down at the man that ran the shop. It has been too long, Rakio, she cheered, waving him over. Humiya could tell that Rakio came from Suna. The old man reminded her of Gara. He was a tall old man with eyes, a pale jade, with a long white beard. He wore a white turban and long reddish-brown robes with black pants, a white cloth wrapped around his waist and over his shoulder. Oh, How I missed my most valued customer. Rakio laughed, walking over to them with his cane before holding his hand up to help Sancho off. Stop it, you say that to every customer, Sancho giggled, grabbing his hand to get off. Caught me, Rakio chuckled, rubbing the back of his head. The usual assortment. Oh course, Sancho said. Kurashi quickly climbed out the barrel and opened the latch to get off. Humiya followed in his wake. Rakio watched them get off with a hearty laugh. My, what were you doing in that barrel, Kurashi? Something gave you a scare? He asked, walking up to them. A huge crow came down and almost took Humiya. Kurashi cried, waving his arms to emphasize its size. Rakio ruffled Kurashi's head. Now that's an adventure. He cheered before looking at Humiya. Glad you came out unharmed. Their eyes met and his smile grew brighter. I never knew you picked up a granddaughter, he said. She always had a weak disposition, so this is her first time out, Sancho said offhandedly, holding the cuman's reins to keep him still. Rakio nodded, stroking his beard. Ah, I see, he replied. How have you been? Sancho interjected. It has been a while since I have seen you. Rakio blinked. Oh, honestly, business has taken a hit. Konoha has closed its gates, he said. Sancho gasped and replied, that's horrible. What happened? Rakio sat down on the bench behind his stand and sighed. Remember the earthquake a time ago? He asked. Oh course. Shook the ground so hard that I almost fell. Quite a few of my dishes broke too, Sancho replied. Well, a fellow merchant heard from another that it was caused by an ancient beast. They heard its mighty roars from miles away. The earthquakes were so big that they made the rivers change direction. Rakio cried. Look at the river yourself if you don't believe me. Humiya trembled at the description. The Nine Tails attack felt like it only happened yesterday. Also seen some Konoha nin scouring the area as well. Scary people. Ninja, he continued. And the most wretched, Sancho added, shaking her head with her hand on her cheek. Humiya perked up at that. Konoha nin, where, she cried, gripping the man's robes. Quiet, you are scaring the kids, Sancho said, prying Humiya off Rakio and hugging her. She looks more enthralled than scared, darling, he replied. No scared. Wanna know? Humiya insisted, her voice muffled by being squished by Sancho's embrace. The elder woman shushed her and said, you don't need to hide your fear. It's all right, Sancho. The ninja passed by here a few days ago. Gave me quite a scare when they asked me questions, but I thankfully had nothing that they wanted, the old man told her before standing up to greet a customer. Sancho sighed and dug into her apron pocket. She took out a small pouch tied with a long string and handed it to Kurashi. Enough eavesdropping, kids. Get yourselves a bite to eat while us adults talk, she said, handing the bag to Kurashi. Kurashi smiled and opened the pouch to count what was inside. He then tied the string around his neck and tucked the pouch under his shirt. Now run along and come right back. We have to go cloth shopping as well, she told them, pushing Humiya towards Kurashi, wagging her finger. But, Humiya mumbled. We will, Grandma, Kurashi said, taking Humiya by the hand and dragging her away. Humiya pouted as Kurashi dragged her through the crowds, upset about the missed opportunity to leave this place. Kurashi, on the other hand, was beaming. What would you like to eat? Kurashi asked, looking hungrily at the stalls selling different foods from buns to meats. Humiya was still full from breakfast. No curry, she replied, knowing that she had enough curry for a lifetime. Kurashi eyeing a stall, chuckling, I can't disagree with that. He led Humiya toward the stall. All right. Those kebabs look good, he said, pointing at the assortment of kebabs that the stall owner piled in front of them. He ordered 4 beef kebabs before handing Humiya one of them. She looked at the meat and veggies on a stick and slowly took a bite. The savory meat mixed with the sweet vegetables was good. She ended up finishing it in a few bites. Karashi led her away, eating 2 kebabs in 1 bite. We each have Rio to spare, he said cheerfully. I need a new carving knife. Oh, Karashi. Karashi's body flinched at the sound of that. Oh no, he said, pulling Humia forward to run. But before he could gain momentum, Karashi was grabbed by the collar by a much older boy, looking about 12 or 13. Humia frowned at the boy. She knew a bully when she saw one. That's no way to treat a friend, you stuttering fool, the scruffy-looking boy laughed, wrapping his arm around Karashi's shoulders, snatching the remaining kebab in his hand before eating it in 1 bite. Karashi's shoulders tensed, watching his friend chew with his mouth open. Hey, Gorudo, he said, trembling. Gorudo tightened his grip around Karashi, making him choke. I am Golden Boy Gorudo. Not just Gorudo. How many times do I have to tell you? Gorudo asked, lifting a brow as he leaned over at him. Karashi opened his mouth to speak, but only a gargle came out. What? Cat still got your tongue? Gorudo asked with a sneer. I might forgive you if you give me all your Ryo. Humia looked between the boys, and felt the tensions rise. She knew that if she did nothing, they were going to get hurt. She wondered if he was the danger the crow warned her about. Hey! Humia shouted, glaring at the boy. The boy only scoffed at her. You never told me you had a little sister, Gorudo said. Don't touch her, Karashi said, struggling under the guy's arm. Gorudo tightened his arms around Karashi's neck. I didn't say you can talk, you freak, he growled, reaching out to her with his other hand. In a rush, she did the only thing she could think of, kicking him in his groin. Gorudo doubled over in pain, loosening his grip on Karashi before falling to his knees. Humia took this chance to grab Karashi's hand and run. Come on, she shouted, weaving through the crowd. Humia rushed for as fast as her little legs could carry her, dragging Karashi behind her. That didn't last though, since the boy was much more athletic and ended up dragging her. She heard a familiar caw and looked up to see the crow from earlier circling above them. Crow! She cried. Karashi looked up and shrieked before turning a corner into an alleyway, its overhanging roofs obscuring the sky. He stopped behind a trash can. I think we lost him, he panted, looking back. Humia huffed, putting her hands on her knees. She didn't remember the last time she ran so hard, adrenaline pumping through her. Humia looked behind and saw Gorudo in the distance, his blonde hair rushing behind him and his yellow eyes enraged. No, she screamed. Karashi ran forward, but Humia tripped over a pebble and fell on her face. Damn it, she shouted in English. It was too late. Gorudo caught up to them and kicked her in the stomach, hard. Humia gasped for air, the air too knocked out of her for her to scream. That's for kicking me in the balls, brat, he spat before spitting in her face. Humia could only watch as Karashi backed against the way, staring at Gorudo in horror as the bully drew near. Trembling, he balled his hands into fists. Go away, he screamed, lunging toward Gorudo, only for the bully to grab him by the collar and slam him against the wall. You think you could get away, pipsqueak? He growled, tightening his grip. I am Golden Boy Gorudo. And you never cross me. Humia could hardly breathe as she tried to get up. She reached out to Karashi, his face turning red and drooling as he dangled. She could feel the life-slowing fade. Desperate, she felt energy come into her eyes. Everything went into slow motion. Stop, she screamed. What did you say to me? Gorudo snarled, turning to her. Their eyes met, and she felt herself connect with him. He froze as if under a trance. Go, she ordered. Gorudo shook as if trying to fight whatever force she had until she overpowered him. You'll pay for this, he sputtered before running away. Humia breathed in relief, rubbing her now sore throat. She gathered her strength before going to Karashi. He was coughing on his hands and knees. She put her hand on his back. Thanks, he said, shaking as he got up, rubbing his neck as he looked at her. He gasped, your eyes. Humiya put her hands over one. Sharingan, she replied, willing the energy to leave her eyes. Karashi nodded, dazed. Grandma is gonna freak if she sees it, he said. They looked up and saw that it was the crow perched on a trash can. Humiya never knew a bird could look so smug. Karashi huddled close to her as she glared at the crow. Come, it asked, tilting its head. Humiya clutched her stomach and stood up, wanting so badly to say no. But, she knew that it wasn't leaving and she had no energy to flee at that point. Fine, she gritted through her teeth. The crow squawked with glee as it fluttered off the trash can, beckoning them to follow. Humiya and Karashi looked at each other before back at the crow. Go, she told Karashi. Karashi groaned as he got up. They leaned on each other as they walked out of the alleyway. They walked into a less crowded street, the crow walking in front. The buildings around them were smaller with tin roofs, some more rusty than others. Many people sat around in rags, some eyed them. I've never been in this part of town before, he fretted. Grandma was clear about me not coming to this part of town. Humiya hummed in reply, being too painful to talk. She limped forward. Craw. The crow then stopped to look back at them. What? Humiya asked. She watched the bird flap its wings and fly over and land on a wooden sign in front of large wooden gates. The gates led to a large building that had a rusted tin roof and wooden walls. A few of its windows were broken. In the courtyard looked to be a small wooden playground with a swing tied to a large tree. It looked to Humiya to be an orphanage. Hurry. Come. It crowed. Humiya glanced at Karashi, wondering if he had the same ominous feeling as she did. I guess it wants us to go inside, he said. Humiya frowned, not completely trusting the bird. But it was either this or wander around the dangerous streets. She moved forward as Karashi held her shoulders, making her feel like a meat shield. They climbed the stairs to its chipped double doors and Humiya fiddled with the lock. The door was unlocked. The interior looked as rundown and the exterior, wallpaper peeling off the walls and holes in the floor. At least they could hear other children in the halls, some laughing while others chatted. At the end of the hall, they found a middle-aged woman with deep bags under her eyes. She looked down at them and deepened her frown, the lines protruding from her face. Of all times to have more orphans, she grumbled, turning to them. The aura that came from the woman made Humiya shudder. Hello, Karashi mumbled. What are you doing here? Did your parents also abandon you with the promise that they were going to find work in Konoha? She asked. Humiya furrowed her brow at the overly specific claim, face reddening with annoyance. No. We're lost, he said. Do you know where the market is? Humiya wanted to cheer Karashi on for his quick thinking, but realized that she didn't know where that blasted crow took them. They might as well be lost the more she thought about it. The matron let out a visible breath of relief. Why didn't you say so? The market is not actually far from here. What you have to do? Before the woman could finish, the sounds of a screeching baby were heard. The matron's mood immediately turned sour again. Damn baby. Why can't it stay quiet like the others? She hissed as she stomped toward the sound. Humiya and Karashi followed. Inside the room they entered, there were rows of babies in cribs, some of them whining while hugging themselves as if trying to comfort themselves. This made Humiya's heart ache. I am here, so quiet you, the matron said as she lifted the crying baby roughly, coughing in her arms. Humiya looked closer and was shocked to see who it was. Sasuke, she cried. The first thing Kushina Uzumaki saw when she opened her eyes was a painfully blurry white. She blinked rapidly at the reflective shade before noticing she was surrounded by a curtain. The familiar stench of rubbing alcohol and death filled her nose. With the smell alone, she knew that she was in the hospital. Kushina tried to lift herself up, but the aches in her body made her limbs heavy, almost limp. After a few attempts, she sluggishly sat up to find herself wearing a white robe and under a thin blanket. She put her hand against her temple in an attempt to clear the fogginess in her head, but it did little to remedy it. Then, she heard a baby cry, her baby cry. All at once, flashes of what happened busted in her mind. Humia's prophecy, Naruto's birth, the masked man's taunts as he released the 9 tails from her stomach. Minato's sorrowful expression as he formed the seal that took his life and soul. Naruto, she rasped, tasting iron. Naruto. Kushina grabbed the curtains that surrounded her as leverage to get out of bed only for it to collapse and take her with it. She tumbled and collapsed onto the floor, making Naruto weep louder. The door to the hospital room swung open to reveal a nurse. "Goodness, are you all right, Mrs. Uzumaki?" she gasped, rushing up to Kushina. "Naruto," Kushina groaned. "Your baby is all right, ma'am. Checked him earlier. Either just hungry or needs a diaper change," the brown-eyed nurse said as she gently picked her up bridal style before tucking her into bed with ease. "I'll give him to you once you're situated." Kushina watched the nurse check her IV before going to Naruto. The baby flailed in the woman's arms. Her heart clenched. Diapers not soiled. Most likely hungry. "Here you go, ma'am," the nurse said. She handed the baby to Kushina, helping her position Naruto in her arms for nursing. Kushina sighed in relief when Naruto stopped crying and began to drink. "There we go, ma'am," the nurse sighed as she straightened her dark blue hair under her cream cap. "I'll let Madame Sarutobi know that you are awake." "Madame Sarutobi," Kushina repeated before her eyes widened. "You mean Bawako is alive, ya know?" The nurse nodded and bowed before leaving. Kushina looked down at Naruto, a glimmer of hope ringing inside her. If Bawako is alive, maybe Minato. She loosened the light blue blanket that was wrapped around Naruto and placed her hand on his stomach. She pushed a little chakra into him to reveal the inky swirls etched onto his skin. Kushina's body went cold as she stared at the seal, her heartbeat quickening. She closed her eyes and sensed the 9 tails coursing through her from her seal as well, weaker but still there. The Reaper Death Seal. Not only did Minato sacrifice his life for the village, but also his soul. The knock on the door broke Kushina from her concentration and watched Bawako walk in with tears in her eyes. Her mentor looked better than she had in years, her light brown hair in a ponytail and her petite frame that was hunched over with age now stood tall. She wore her white robes when she worked as a medical nin before she retired. "He's gone," Kushina sobbed, looking back at Naruto, his blue eyes staring up at hers. Minato's eyes. She kissed Naruto on the cheek. "He's really gone." Bawako placed a hand on her shoulder. "Why him?" Kushina cried, rocking back and forth. "Why? You know why," Bawako whispered as she rubbed her shoulder. "Now, take a breath and calm yourself. You are still recovering." Kushina took a deep breath and wiped the tears from her face. She did know why. It was for the village. Almost everything they did was for the good of the hidden leaf. Knowing that did not ease the gaping void in her chest. "You have been unconscious for 3 weeks now, on the verge of death. Your body sustained a significant amount of damage, but you are expected to make a full recovery," Bawako explained. "And Naruto is a healthy baby boy. It is a miracle." "A miracle?" Kushina spat. "Nothing about this is a miracle." She caressed Naruto's cheek as he gave a little coo. "Minato's dead and the village." "Oh, the village. Did we at least catch the man who did this?" Bawako's grave expression told her everything. "And Makoto? How many people died?" "Everything is being handled. Your friend is alive. Do not stress yourself over small things," Bawako replied simply. "Small?" Kushina shouted. "How can you say that? Masked attacker or not, she played a hand in this catastrophe." Rage mixed with guilt as she felt the gravity of her people's death, families ruined. Makoto, her best and most caring friend, home was destroyed with countless family members killed. There was blood on her hands, so much blood. If she wasn't so careless, could this have been prevented? Could Minato still be alive? You will be staying with me and my husband in the Sotobi main house. Luckily, my residence came out with only a few broken windows, but your house was completely destroyed in the attack, Bawako said, taking her hand off of Kushina's shoulder. Kushina could not help but let out an empty chuckle. The years that she and Minato spent saving enough money to buy a house to call their home, of her hopes of having the big happy family she and Minato always wanted, all for naught. If only she realized how selfish that dream was back then. She never would have thought that one selfish dream could cost the lives of so many. You have a long way to go before stepping out of this hospital. You will be put under observation these upcoming weeks and you are to stay in this room, Bawako told her. All right, Kushina said, resigned to her fate. Thank you. If you need anything, just call for the nurse, Bawako told her before leaving. Alone again, Kushina was left to her thoughts. Naruto touched her wet cheek, and she looked down at him. I am so sorry, Kushina whispered, caressing his small puff of blonde hair. You are going to have a hard life. You are going to have to grow up without a father. She kissed him on the forehead and held him close. Her son stared at her, his innocent gaze filling her with determination. She wiped her tears. But don't you worry. I will protect you and you will grow up to be a powerful ninja, you know. You will have good days with your bad and always have someone by your side. You will never be alone, Naruto. Kushina smiled as Naruto grabbed her finger, his grip strong. Kushina stopped counting how long she had been in her hospital room after a month, the days going by too fast for comfort. She knew she was being avoided, isolated from the rest of the patients. Even when she walked the halls, all of the doors were closed and the fellow patients she did meet made sure to keep their distance. Kushina resigned to write letters to Makoto and Kakashi, asking how they were doing but received no replies. This worried her greatly, but she could do little to remedy it until today. There was a knock on the door before it opened to reveal her nurse, who she found was named Sarah, looking more chipper than usual. Mrs. Uzumaki, Madame Sarutobi told me that it was time for you to go to the Sarutobi main house. Here are your clothes, Sarah said as she handed her a pile of clothes with some wooden sandals and a bag. Please let me know when you are done, so I can bring an escort. Kushina smiled and nodded her thanks before the nurse left. She felt giddy as she unfolded her clothes to change into them. It was a simple green dress with pink flowers printed on its hem and loose sleeves. Once she finished getting ready, she pinned her long red hair into a loose bun. She then looked in the bag and saw that there was baby supplies and snacks in it which she was grateful for. There was a cream sling in the pile and gently slung still sleeping Naruto to her chest with it. It seemed that the only thing Naruto inherited from her was that he was also a heavy sleeper when he felt safe and comfortable. With a small bit of smoke, her hair was no longer a deep red but Minato's blonde and her eyes his blue. After they were ready to go, Kushina opened the door and peeked outside the hallway to see it was empty as usual. I can do this, she whispered to herself before walking down the hallway to the stairwell. She reached the staircase and went down, stopping midway to let nurses carrying someone in a stretcher walk past. She knew they were dead with the lack of chakra coming from them and the white sheet covering their body. Kushina bowed her respected before continuing on her way, wondering how many other people she knew had to be carried the same way after the attack. She imagined Minato being taken to his resting place. She wasn't even able to attend his funeral. Kushina wished that he could be cremated and kept with her but remembered the tradition. Hokages were all put into graves somewhere in the Hokage monument. Either way, Her husband's soul would never find peace with the deal he made with the Shinigami, and to her knowledge, there is no way for a contract with a deity to be reversed. His body might be peacefully cold, but his soul, condemned to damnation. Kushina shook her head, blinking away any oncoming tears. I can't think of this right now. There's nothing I can do about it, she whispered. Kushina continued down the stairs into the front entrance, trying to make herself look confident. Mrs. Uzumaki, the front desk lady, called to her. Kushina almost tripped, cringing at her name being called. She should have expected that the front desk woman was a censor. With a face masked with a smile, she walked up to the woman with large circular glasses. Good afternoon. She glanced down at the woman's name tag. Chi-Chi. What is it? She asked with a large grin. I was told that you would be leaving with an escort, Chi-Chi said, writing something down on a sheet of paper. Kushina gave a light-hearted laugh. Oh, I convinced Bawako that I did not need one. I met up with her on the way here and she said okay after some persuasion, ya know. I see, Chi-Chi replied, not looking like she bought it. Is that why you are using a henge? Let me go check. Oh, this. I am easily recognizable, ya know. I don't want to be bothered as I go home, Kushina said with a wink. You don't need to bother Bawako with something she has already cleared. She is a very busy woman, and you would only bother her. You know how she gets when she has to say things twice. The front desk woman sighed solemnly. They both knew of Bawako's harsh tongue. If you put it that way. Kushina heard the lobby door open and saw a group of frantic people rush in, quite a few of them carrying their bloodied and bruised comrades. And you have patients to attend to. Goodbye, Kushina cheered. Hey, wait. Kushina weaved past the crowd and was already out the door and down the congested dirt road before Chi-Chi could finish. She would make sure to give her nurse and the front desk lady a few apology gifts and personally thank them for their care later. She took a deep breath of fresh autumn air and patted Naruto, her baby still sleeping peacefully in her arms despite their noisy surroundings. Heavy sleeper indeed, she said to herself. Next stop, Uchiha compound. Kushina continued down the road and looked at all the buildings in different stages of being rebuilt, construction workers hammering into their roofs. The streets were luckily cleared of any debris, and she knew where she was going. In case someone was following her, Kushina took the longer route to the compound, walking down crowded streets and going down a few alleyways. She even stopped by a few stalls and got some gifts she knew Makoto's children would like. Along the way, she stopped at a pile of rubble where a street used to be and a part of her just wanted to jump from building to building, but she doubted Naruto could handle it. She decided to go around. A few minutes later, she finally made it to her destination, huffing from the excursion. She cursed her still healing body, remembering when walking a few miles was a breeze. Kushina could tell that the Uchiha clan had been hit the worst, with almost all of the buildings that used to stand proud and tall now only piles of rubble. At least a few of the residential homes still stood and some of them looked rebuilt. The entrance was blocked off with yellow tape. Her mouth was agape, staring at the sign that was no longer the Uchiha fan. Hyuga, Kushina shouted as she looked at the symbol that shamelessly replaced the Uchiha symbol, her arms trembling with rage. Naruto woke up and began to cry, making Kushina regret shouting. Shish. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to wake you, ya know. Mommy just surprised herself, she hushed, rocking him. He only cried harder. Realizing that her disguise might be the problem, she dispersed the henge. Look, it's mommy. Don't cry. It's okay. Kushina hushed until Naruto's crying reduced to mere whimpers. She then checked him and found that he needed a diaper change. She found a bench where she changed him and looked around. The place was desolate, but she was far from giving up. She began her search for people. After walking down the road and turning a corner, she saw a pair, who she assumed to be father and daughter, digging through the rubble. When she went to take a closer look, she saw that the man did not look like an Uchiha with his golden brown skin. His daughter looked like she took mostly after her mom with her long hair a dark brown and a beauty mark under her eye. Dad, I found mom's picture frame. The little girl cheered, waving the broken frame in her hands before putting it into her bag, the Uchiha symbol on her purple shirt sleeve. Great, Izumi. Her dad cheered, it's getting late. Go to the wagon, so we can go back. Excuse me, Kushina called, jogging to them. The father walked to meet her with his daughter hiding shyly behind his legs. Do you know where the Uchiha compound is now? She asked them. Izumi looked up at her father and he patted her head. The Uchiha compound and the police force headquarters have been relocated near the northern gate, the man told her. Really? That's all the way out in the outskirts, Yano. How will the police do their job when they are in the middle of nowhere? Kushina asked, furrowing her brow. The man shrugged. It was the Hokage's orders. We have to follow them. Kushina grumbled at that but nodded. She wanted to say more, but Izumi's stomach began to growl. She smiled down at the girl and took out a ration bar from her bag. The girl stared at the bar hungrily but checked with her dad for permission. After her dad nodded, she gingerly took it before eating it. Would you like one as well? I have plenty, Kushina insisted, handing him one. The man shook his head. No, thank you. Are you looking for someone? Yes, Kushina said. I want to know if a friend of mine survived. The man nodded in understanding. There is room on our wagon if you need a ride, he said, his daughter nodding in agreement. That would be wonderful, Yano. Kushina cheered before hopping onto their wagon with them. The man flicked the reins, causing the donkey to bray and move forward. Izumi sat between her dad and Kushina, nibbling on her bar. She glanced at Naruto as Kushina fed him. He is so cute, the little girl said. What's his name? Naruto, Kushina said with a small smile. The girl giggled. Like the fish cake? Yes. Kushina laughed. Exactly, Yano. I was eating ramen with my husband at our favorite ramen shop when the name came to him. She smiled at the memory. It was one of the few days that Minato and she were able to have a proper date since he became Hokage. She insisted that they go to Ichiraku Ramen since it was one of her pregnancy cravings. She remembered how she couldn't stop laughing when Minato shouted the name like he uncovered a huge discovery. She joked that their baby will always be their little fish cake no matter how big and strong he got. Kushina began to tear up. She has been doing it a lot these days. If only he was here. There was a moment of silence for the dead. Mom was obsessed with ramen too. She would make it for dinner all the time, remember Dad? Izumi mumbled, her eyes watery as well. I would always complain about it. I shouldn't have. She worked so hard, and I should have thanked her more. Tell her that I loved her, but, now I can't. I miss her so much. Izumi, her dad cried, giving her a side hug as she wept into his arms. She knew that you loved her. Even if we never said it, she knew. Kushina comfortingly rubbed her back and looked down the dreary path to the Uchiha compound. The rest of Kushina's journey was in silence. The wagon shifted from quiet streets to busy intersections. After what felt like hours, they finally reached the forestry outskirts of the Hidden Leaf village. Kushina leaned back and basked in the coolness the shade of the overhanging trees gave them. She knew that she would have gotten there faster if she ran, but traveling the civilian way felt a lot calmer than the usual ninja rush from mission to mission. It was also better for Naruto, who was sound asleep in her arms. Hearing familiar rustling in the trees, she looked up and saw a few ninjas tree hop by. This made Kushina look ahead and notice a few buildings in the distance, the hostels. They made it. The pair of rundown wooden buildings stood lopsided with tin roofs, the Uchiha symbol hanging proudly on the sign in front. Even though many people passed through the village, the southern point was a more popular entry with its clutter of shops and hotels, it left the commodities on the northern side neglected. It was a wonder the buildings survived the attack. It seemed like this was the only part of the village that was left practically unscathed. Kushina couldn't help but grimace. The Uchiha clan used to be a small village all on its own but was now reduced to this few. The wagon stopped at the front entrance. The man helped Kushina and his daughter off it. Among the few passers-by, Kushina saw no one familiar. Everyone seemed to be keeping their distance, pretending to mind their own business while giving her small glances. This reminded her of when Makoto told her how many members of the Uchiha were actually very talkative, contrary to popular belief. Uchiha parents tended to drill into their children's heads to keep conversations behind closed doors and only with those they most trusted. A familiar ache returned to her chest. Gone were the days when she would talk with Makoto for hours on end from everything to nothing in particular. Now that she thought about it, she wasn't even sure that Makoto would even want to talk to her. She hadn't replied to any of her letters. No one did. "I will meet you back at our room," he told his daughter before bowing goodbye to Kushina. "I never got your name, Yano," Kushina called as everyone got off the wagon. The man smiled slightly. "Daiki. I hope you find your friend," he said before going around back. "I hope you find your friend as well. And thanks again for the bar. It was really good," Izumi said as well before giving her a hug. "Me too," Kushina whispered, returning it. "Bye Kushina. Bye Naruto," Izumi said, about to walk away, but paused. "Itachi," she gasped, sprinting down the dirt road. Kushina's eyes widened in the direction Izumi ran and there he was, Makoto's oldest, walking toward them with an older boy in tow. The 5-year-old boy limped slowly, leaning against a crutch due to his bandaged leg. He had a haunted look on his face, an expression that should be reserved for traumatized ninja. "Itachi," she called as well, following the little girl to the pair. "Izumi and Mrs. Uzumaki," he greeted, not bothering to hide his surprise. "I was looking all over for you," Izumi cried, hugging him. Itachi patted her back and looked up at Kushina, his eyes widening when his eyes drifted to baby Naruto. "This is Naruto," Kushina said to Itachi and Shisui. "I am happy that you are all alright." Kushina smiled at the reunion before looking at the older Uchiha boy. He was slightly taller than Itachi, his short black hair spiky. She eyed the headband that gleamed on his forehead. Based on his headband alone, she would assume that he was at least 12 or 13, but he was much too small. She realized that the little boy before her was the child prodigy people have been raving about, Shisui. The child genius who, like Kakashi, graduated early due to the Third Ninja War. Much too early in Kushina's opinion. He smirked at her, but his eyes could not hide his exhaustion. "When I saw the bridge collapse, I thought you didn't make it," Izumi cried, wiping her eyes with her sleeve. "You don't have to worry about Itachi here," Shisui chuckled as he ruffled Itachi's hair. "He's a lot stronger than he looks." "I look weak?" Itachi asked, clutching his crutch. "Of course not," Izumi huffed, glaring at Shisui. "Itachi is one of the strongest ninjas I know. Who are you to call him that?" "I am Shisui," he said. "How do you know Itachi?" "He saved my life. He brought me to safety during the attack with Humiya and Sasuke on his back. It was so cool," Izumi said, her eyes sparkling. She looked around and behind the boys. "Where is Humiya and Sasuke, anyway?" "Yes, I also want to know where they are. I brought you all gifts," Kushina added. She dug into her bag and took out a pink dinosaur plush, a bronze flower hairpin, and a box of dango before handing the items to Itachi. "Here, I am sure Sasuke would love this plush as much as his green one and Humiya would adore another pin. I know how much you love dango." Itachi stared at the gifts, his eyes beginning to water. "Thank you for the gifts. They would have loved them. I will put them on their graves," he whispered. Kushina covered her mouth in shock, the information piercing her worse than getting her pressure points stabbed by poisoned Senbon needles. Humiya and Sasuke, gone. Izumi whimpered, still trying to grasp what she just heard. We were so close to the shelters, but I failed them. They were swept away in the river, their bodies not found, and the rock crushed my leg. I lost a few toes. The healer told me that it will permanently hinder my balance. Itachi held the gifts against his chest. Despite this handicap, I promise to become the strongest ninja. I will find the man who did this and destroy him. Kushina saw Itachi's expression in many of her comrades during the war. All making a personal vow to take revenge even if it killed them. It never ended well. Their fate was to go off alone and become a shell of who they once were with that singular purpose. She knew the pain that was etched into his soul. She could not bear to see Makoto's son go down that path. Her friend lost so much already. Kushina kneeled to his eye level and put a hand on his shoulder. Itachi, if everyone who lost their loved ones to that man thought the same way you do, who would be left to protect those who survived? Who would protect the village? Itachi was silent, clenching his fists. Kushina put her hand over his injured leg and concentrated her chakra on it. The burst of energy transferred into Itachi's leg, healing it. Itachi unwrapped the bandages and she saw his foot healed, but his first 3 toes were still missing. Itachi struggled a little before standing upright before stumbling a little. Why can't I find balance? You are strong, Itachi. Even if your balance is permanently damaged, you have the makings of becoming a powerful ninja. Soon. This will only be a small hindrance, Kushina said. Remember that one of the core values of being a ninja is teamwork. Yeah, Izumi said, I am going to be a ninja too and bring the one who killed my mom to justice. You got to grow a little first, Shisui said, ruffling Izumi's hair. Hey, you became a ninja young. Why can't I? It's a long, boring story, Izumi. Shisui said. I want to hear it as well, Itachi mumbled. We both want to be as strong as you. Kushina smiled at the trio. She knew that they were going to be an amazing team. She said her goodbyes to them and left. Kushina grimaced the whole way to the Sarutobi main house. After the pep talk, she gave it to Itachi and his group. She couldn't bring herself to meet with Makoto. The feeling that she sent Humiya and Sasuke to their deaths was overwhelming. The round building seemingly untouched by the catastrophe that happened. It looked like many of the other homes in the neighborhood, pipes running through the wooden roof of the circular building. She walked up to the house's front door and knocked at the door. A few moments later, the door opened to reveal Bawako's son at the door holding a small hammer. Kushina put on a fake smile, trying to hide her mourning. Asuma, you've grown, she cheered. It is good to see you too, Aunt Kushina, he replied, allowing her inside. Kushina looked at the house, it being the same as was when she left with its cream walls and hardwood flooring. She took off her shoes and put them into the shoe cabinet. So, this is Naruto, Asuma said as he put the hammer down on the shoe cabinet, staring at the sleeping baby. He looks just like Lord Fourth. Yes, Kushina replied, feeling the awkward tension in the room. A part of her wondered if it could cut butter. Would you like to hold him? Asuma put his hands up, his whole body tensing as if he wanted to say no. Okay. Kushina couldn't help but chuckle at that before loosening her sling and tying it onto him. Just hold him like this. There you go. She watched Asuma as he held Naruto securely, watching her baby still sleep soundly. She wondered if her walk to the compound was too much for her little boy. I will come back to check on you two in a bit, she told him, handing him her scroll filled with baby supplies. Come to me if there is a problem. Kushina then walked past him and went to her room. She opened the door and saw that it was a lot smaller than she remembered. It had the same neatly made twin-size bed and small cabinet across from it. The old end table that was situated next to her bed was replaced with a small crib that was not quite finished being assembled. the scroll with the instruction and pieces still sprawled on the floor. I should thank him later, she said to herself as she opened the cabinet to see clothes neatly hung and folded in it. Lastly, she looked at the large chest on the end of her bed that had a note stuck to it. She noticed that it was in Bawako's neat handwriting. Kushina, within this chest contains what we could salvage from your house and Minato's belongings from his office. Bawako. Kushina gasped as she read it before quickly opening the chest to see a pile of scrolls. The neat stack of scrolls was all labeled with different things from kitchen items to ninja tools. Nothing seemed to really catch her eye until she noticed a scroll that made her hands tremble. Minato, she whispered as she quickly took out the sealed thin scroll. She concentrated her chakra to her finger and ran it down his swirly text to undo the seal to read it. My beloved Kushina, if you are reading this, I am no longer in this world. First, I would like to apologize for not being strong enough to continue to be there for you. To share our joys and sorrows, to help raise Naruto. There are many possibilities to how I died, so I have written multiple wills for as many as I could think of in a letter for you to not be seen by the courts. This pertains to if I died from an enemy attack which caused significant damage to the village and our property. How to distribute our assets will be read aloud in the courts, but I sealed another copy at the end of the letter in case the one I have given is tampered with. My beloved, I know you are in pain and that you want to avenge my death. But I implore you to not sacrifice yourself and do so alone. I will only be able to rest in peace if you raise Naruto to be strong and help the village. Sincerely, Minato. By the end of reading the short letter, drops of Kushina's tears littered it, messing up the ink. She placed it away from her to cause no more damage. But you will never rest in peace in the stomach of the Shinigami. You not only sacrificed your body but also your soul, she wept. Kushina felt so weak and numb, she clenched her fists so hard that her nails dug into her skin. She had lost so much, the village had lost so much. It was because of one nameless man. She vowed with all her being to raise her son to be the best he could be and contribute in any way she could to strengthen the village to combat the evil that was that masked man. She collapsed onto her bed, and she cried herself to sleep. In a dream, Kushina was no longer the stubborn and strong young woman but a feeble little girl, covered in cuts and bruises in a dense forest. She washed her wounds in a running creek. Her red hair only went down to her waist, oily as if she hadn't bathed in days. Fear dulled the usual vibrance in her violet eyes. Kushina heard a twig snap which ushered her to run further down the woods. It was dark, but she knew whoever was chasing her was nearby. She stumbled upon a rundown temple that seemed to have been abandoned ages ago. She scurried into it to hide. It was drafty, the worn wood rotten in some places and walls peeling. The only place in the small building that looked oddly well kept was a wall adorned with demon masks, some with horns and others with sharp teeth. Kushina wanted to do nothing more but cower. The door to the place then opened to reveal an old woman wearing a priestess attire. Her clothing, though ripped in some places, she carried more elegance and precision than any royalty. Her hair was white with streaks of red still in it, with her eyes a pale lilac due to a white sheen of blindness. Gee, Grandma, Kushina cried. It was at that moment that she realized that this wasn't some nightmare, but a memory. A memory buried so deep into her mind that she thought she had forgotten it. She wasn't in some old forgotten temple, but the reminiscence of the once great Uzumaki temple. Grandma. Kushina stood up and ran over to the blind woman and held her as if her life depended on it. I followed what you said, Yano. I followed the Naka River out of sight like you told me to escape danger. There were so many bad men. Kushina's voice was muffled as she snuggled into her grandma's embrace. I thought you wouldn't make it. Of course, I made it out alive. I foretold it, did I not? Her grandma rubbed her back. What do they want from us? They want you, Kushina. I prayed to the spirits to change your fate, but all fell on deaf ears. You were chosen, my child, to become the next Jinchuriki. Grandma heaved as she coughed heavily. Grandma. I am fine for now. Let me sit down. Kushina led her to a ripped cushion next to the altar of masks. I don't wanna be a Jinchuriki. Kushina whispered as she laid her head on her lap. You have to get better. You're all I have left. I will not be for long. I have little time left. Soon, you will have many people in your life who will love and care for you as I have. I saw it all in my dreams, her grandma insisted as she petted her hair. But, hush now. I need to tell you something important. Do you see those masks hanging there on display? Those are why we are called mortals above gods, Kushina. I need you to always remember them. Especially the one in the middle, the strongest, the Shinigami. Kushina stared at the Shinigami mask. The same Shinigami that now tortured Minato's soul. Its twisted smile looked as if it was mocking, its sharp yellow teeth contrasted with its white face. Long ago, before either of us were born, gods were among us, wreaking havoc and blessing miracles. Their powers were so great that people all around would worship them. Some even loved us mortals and made great clans. Our ancestors wanted that power, and they got it. We caught all of them? Kushina asked. Once the Uzumaki captured the Shinigami, it did not take long for us to also take its brethren, her grandma chuckled. But for a price. A price has to be paid when putting on the mask. That is why even in this state, no one has dared to touch them. For most, it is their life and soul. For us Uzumaki, it is only an inch of your life. Grandma opened her palm and traced a line on it. Uzumaki are known for their long lifelines, so a few years gone is nothing for us. Her grandma then took her necklace off and gave it to her. Here, your amulet, Kushina asked. But you never take that off. A black jewel the size of an eyeball was situated in the middle of a bronze plate necklace with ancient seal markings around it. At the center, a red lotus was etched on it. Remember to keep it safe. The one who this belongs to searches for it still and you must never let them have it back, she warned. Before she could ask why, the door opened, and Hidden Leaf Ninja began to pour in. Before they could get her, she awoke with a gasp. Kushina looked around and saw Naruto sleeping peacefully in his now finished crib. She got up slowly and made sure not to disturb him and went back to the chest. She found the scroll labeled jewelry to make sure the amulet was there. It was. She stared down at it. Kushina could not believe that her memories of her grandma were so faint until now. Kushina never saw her again after that night. She died shortly after Kushina became the Jinchuriki. She might not have been able to save her grandma, but she must save her husband's soul. Minato, I will free you, she whispered to herself. A week passed before Kushina regained most of her strength. She spent most of her time taking care of Naruto. Before long, Kushina found an opportunity to slip out of the Sarutobi house and go to the Uzumaki temple. She made sure to wear the amulet. Luckily was able to make Asuma play babysitter again and be off on her merry way. Kushina might have regained her stamina, but just to be safe, she hitched a ride on a wagon to get mostly there by a couple of friendly farmers. When she got off, she saw the beginning of the familiar dirt path of her youth. Kushina stared at the overgrowth before beginning down the path. The farther she walked, the more she sensed that someone was following her. Her ninja senses were ringing like alarm bells. Kushina continued down the path, pretending not to notice. The chakra signature felt familiar. Of someone who watched over her a lot while she was pregnant. After a few minutes of walking, she found the shrine. It was more run down than she remembered, with the entrance barely visible with the roof weight caving in. Kushina gathered her bearings before she entered the temple. Inside, the only thing that looked untouched was the masks that adorned the wall. Not even dust touched them. She took a deep breath before going to grab the Shinigami mask and put it over her face. Immediately after, she felt the demon's presence. An Uzumaki, interesting. The last imbecile who put on my mask was swiftly killed, an eerie voice whispered in her head. Release my husband. Now. She screamed, knife in hand. Laughter erupted in her head. You dare order me with that weak body of yours? Be grateful your soul is still intact, the god said. But my husband, Kushina faltered, lowering the knife. I was told you would release the spirits in your stomach if you possessed a body and cut their stomach. This can't be for nothing. Interesting. You actually believe that. I can do that for someone who is strong. If I even tried to possess you, you would die on the spot, he said. But there is a way, I suppose. Let's make a deal. Kushina is silent for a moment. A deal? How do I know you would keep your end of it? She asked. And how would I know if you keep your end of it? It is the risk of the deal and why they are so powerful, he said. If you free me from this mask, I will set everyone in my stomach free. Do you have a deal? Kushina was hesitant, thinking of the consequences of setting a death god out into the world. I may be a merciful god, but I am not a patient one. Choose. As Kushina stood there quietly, the screams of the souls in his stomach rang in her head, Minato's being the most pronounced. I'll do it, she screamed before prying off the mask. Inside it, there was a seal. Kushina bit into her thumb and drew blood before writing the universal sign to undo a seal. The mask then crumbled in her hands and the Shinigami spread his arms out before her and opened his mouth. Hundreds, maybe thousands of souls flowed out of his mouth and away from her. She quickly looked around for Minato but could not find them. Then she heard an eruption of laughter. The other masks on the wall began to crumble and the other demons started floating away. Pleasure doing business with you, the Shinigami laughed and was about to go through her, but a flash of light stopped him. It came from the jewel in her necklace. So, you, her eye. Interesting, the Shinigami said as he whirled around her. We will meet again. He then left with all the other demons. Kushina's legs went heavy and fell on her knees, feeling the weight of what she had released out into the world. She looked up at the remaining fiery soul and held her hands out to it. It was Minato. She could feel him. Minato, you're free, ya know, she whispered before she collapsed onto the floor, feeling the strain from how much chakra it took out of her. Instead of landing on the floor, she felt a ball of warmth surrounding her. Kushina reached out for it. Can you stay with me, just for a little while? She heard Minato's voice. My love, all of me cannot stay by your side, but a piece of me still lives in you, Minato echoed. Thank you. A part of her thought it was just her imagination that she could hear his voice, feel his warm embrace. And with him, everything went dark.